My name is Michael Kowalski, but everyone calls me Bear. I've been a ranger at Denali National Park for 18 years now, and in that time, I've pulled 43 people off Mount McKinley's slopes. Some were alive, some weren't. That's just how the mountain works. People think Alaska is beautiful, and it is, until it tries to kill you. Then it's just cold and dark, and so far from help that screaming doesn't even echo. It just disappears into the wind like you were never there at all. I grew up in Pittsburgh, joined the Army at 17, survived Korea by learning to keep my head down and my rifle clean. When I came back, I couldn't handle the crowds, the noise, the heat. So I moved as far north as I could and learned to climb. Turns out mountains made more sense to me than people ever did. My wife Sarah says I use the mountain to hide from the world. Maybe she's right. But up there, everything is simple. Either you respect the cold, or you die. No politics, no complications, just survival. It was February 1974 when everything I knew about this mountain changed. February in Alaska means darkness. The sun barely climbs over the horizon before it gives up and slides back down. At 14,000 feet on McKinley's north face, it's even worse. Just endless night and cold so brutal it can freeze your lungs if you breathe too deep. I was at the ranger station drinking coffee that tasted like dirt and going through supply logs when the radio crackled to life. Base, this is Air 1. We've got an emergency beacon active at 14,000 feet, north face. German climbing expedition, 4 members. No voice contact, just the beacon. I set down my coffee. How long has the beacon been active? 12 hours. Weather's been too rough to fly. But there's a window opening up now. 12 hours at 14,000 feet in February. If they were injured, they were probably dead by now. If they weren't injured, why weren't they answering their radio? I'm on my way, I said. The helicopter ride up was rough. Wind slammed us sideways, and the pilot, a guy named Dave who'd flown in Vietnam, kept cursing under his breath. Through the window, I could see nothing but white and black, snow and rock. No color, no life. There, Dave said, pointing. The camp came into view. 3 tents, perfectly arranged in a triangle. Equipment stacked neatly outside. A German flag on a pole, hanging limp in the still air. Wait, still air? At 14,000 feet, there's always wind, always. Even on calm days, you get gusts that can knock you off your feet. But looking down at that camp, I couldn't see a single flake of snow moving. That's weird, Dave said, reading my mind. No wind. Barometer says we should be getting hammered right now. He circled twice, looking for a safe landing spot. The snow was too deep, too unstable. I can hover close, he said. But you're jumping. I'm not setting her down in this. I strapped on my pack, checked my gear one more time, and jumped into snow that came up to my knees. The helicopter pulled away, and suddenly I was alone with the silence. And I mean silence. Real silence. Not the quiet you get in a library or a church. This was the absence of sound so complete it made my ears ring. I could hear my heart beating. I could hear my eyelids blinking. Something was very wrong here. I trudged toward the nearest tent, my breath forming ice crystals that hung in the air like tiny diamonds. The tent was expensive, German engineering, rated for extreme cold. The door flap was open. Inside, everything was organized perfectly. Sleeping bags laid out flat, cooking supplies stacked by size, a journal on top of a folded jacket, pencil resting on the open page. But no people. I picked up the journal. The last entry was dated 2 days ago, written in German. I didn't speak German, but I knew numbers. The temperature reading said -58 degrees. I checked the other 2 tents. Same thing. Everything perfect, everything empty. That's when I saw the footprints. They started at the third tent, normal boot prints in the snow. 4 sets heading north toward the ridge. I followed them, my ice axe in one hand, radio in the other. The prints were clear at first. 4 people walking in a line, like they were heading somewhere specific. Then, about 50 yards from camp, something changed. The boot prints became something else. I stopped walking, stopped breathing, just stared at the snow. The human prints ended mid-step, and in their place were tracks I'd never seen before. They were huge, almost 2 feet long, shaped like bear paws, but wrong. The claw marks were too long, too curved, and there were thumb prints. Bears don't have opposable thumbs. The tracks led straight up a vertical ice wall, straight up, like whatever made them could walk on ice the way I walk on flat ground. I keyed my radio. "Base, this is Bear. I've got a situation here." Static. I tried again. "Base, do you copy?" More static, but this time it sounded almost like voices. Like someone was talking, but the words were stretched out and played backwards. My radio had never done that before. I looked back at the camp, then at the tracks going up the impossible wall. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get back to the pickup zone and get off this mountain. But somewhere up there, 4 people might still be alive. I started climbing. The ice wall was 70 feet of frozen hell. Normally I'd rope up, take my time, set protection every 10 feet. But whatever made those tracks had gone straight up without any gear at all. And I had a bad feeling that time mattered. My ice axes bit into the frozen surface, and I pulled myself up foot by foot. The silence pressed on me like a weight. No wind, no sound. Just my breathing and the thunk-thunk of metal hitting ice. Halfway up, I found something frozen into the wall. A hand. Human. Male. Wedding ring on the finger. The hand was reaching out of the ice like it had been trying to grab something, and the ice had just swallowed it whole. I didn't stop climbing. At the top, the tracks continued across a snowfield toward an outcrop of black rock. I followed them, moving faster now, my legs burning from the altitude and exertion. That's when I found the first body. He was standing up, just standing there in the middle of the snow. Frozen solid, arms outstretched like he was trying to push something away. His face was locked in an expression of pure terror, mouth open, eyes wide, looking at something behind him. I walked around to see what he'd been looking at. Nothing, just empty snow and dark sky. I checked his gear. German passport in his jacket. Hans Müller, age 34, from Munich. Experienced climber, based on his equipment. His radio was clipped to his belt. I tried it, static with those same backwards voices. A sound behind me made me spin around, ice axe raised. Nothing there, but I could swear I'd heard footsteps, heavy ones, moving fast. "Hello?" I called out. My voice disappeared into the silence like water into sand. No echo, nothing. I kept moving, following the tracks. They led to a small emergency shelter built into the rocks. Someone was inside. I could see the glow of a headlamp through the canvas door. "Hello, Park Service. I'm here to help." The light moved. The door opened. A man stumbled out, and I barely caught him before he fell. He was shaking so hard his teeth were rattling. His face was white with frostbite, his lips blue. "They took them," he said in accented English. "They took Hans and Werner and..." His eyes rolled back, and he started speaking German, fast and desperate. I got him back inside the shelter and started treating his frostbite. His fingers were bad. He'd probably lose at least 2 of them, but he'd live if I could get him off the mountain. "What's your name?" I asked. Carl Schmidt, from Boston. I grew up there. English. I speak English. He was forcing the words out like he had to remember how. Carl, what happened to your team? His eyes focused on me, and I saw something in them I'd seen before, in Korea, in men who'd seen too much. They're not bears, he said. Everyone said, there are no bears this high in winter. But they're not bears. They look like bears, but they're not. They're something else. Something old. How many did you see? 3, maybe 4. They move so fast. And they can... He stopped, shaking his head. You won't believe me. Try me. They can disappear, walk right into the snow and vanish. And their eyes... He grabbed my jacket. Their eyes glow blue, like electricity, like they're not even alive. I'd pulled a lot of people off this mountain. Altitude sickness makes you see things, makes you believe impossible things. The cold messes with your brain, makes up stories to explain why you're dying. But Carl's frostbite was real. Hans's body was real. That hand in the ice was real. Where are the others? I asked. Carl pointed north. Up there. They dragged them. Werner was still alive when they... He couldn't finish. My radio crackled. For a second, I heard a clear voice. Bear, get out. Not safe. Then more static. I looked at Carl. Can you walk? He nodded. Then we're leaving, now. But when I opened the shelter door, the tracks I'd followed were gone. The whole snowfield was smooth, untouched, like nobody had walked there in 1,000 years. And standing at the edge of the darkness, barely visible against the black rocks, was something tall, something watching us. I pulled Carl back inside and zipped the door shut. We sat in silence, listening. Footsteps circled the shelter, heavy, slow, patient. Something sniffed at the canvas, and I smelled something wrong, like ozone and old ice and meat left in a freezer too long. The footsteps moved away. We waited 10 minutes, 20, an hour. Finally, I opened the door again. The footsteps in the snow led away, back toward the vertical wall I'd climbed. But these tracks were different. These weren't boot prints or paw prints. These were human feet, bare human feet, walking across snow at -60 degrees. And there were a lot of them. I got Carl down the ice wall by rope, half carrying him when his frost-bitten hands couldn't grip anymore. Every few minutes, I'd stop and listen, but there was still no wind, no sound except our breathing and the crunch of snow under our boots. When we reached the German camp, I found something that made my blood run cold. The tents were collapsed now, not torn or damaged, just collapsed, like all the air had been sucked out of them. And they were covered in a thin layer of frost that sparkled in my headlamp. Frost on the outside of tents in -60-degree weather. That didn't make sense. Frost forms when warm air meets cold. There was no warm air up here. Unless something warm had been standing over the tents. Something breathing. I heard an engine and looked up to see helicopter lights. Dave was coming back, right on schedule for the pickup. Come on, I said to Carl, pulling him toward the landing zone. That's when I saw Johnny Tanana's snowmobile coming up the ridge from the lower camp. Johnny was an Athabascan guide, 50 years old, who knew this mountain better than anyone. I'd called him in before heading up, standard procedure for a rescue this remote. The helicopter couldn't land, so Dave lowered a rescue basket. I strapped Carl in, and he was pulled up into the sky, his eyes locked on mine the whole way. Get out, he mouthed. The helicopter disappeared into the darkness. Johnny pulled up next to me and cut his engine. He looked at the collapsed tents, then at me. You found them? He asked. Found one body, one survivor, 2 still missing. He walked to the edge of the camp and stared out into the darkness. You shouldn't have come up here in February. People were dying. People die on this mountain every year. February's different. He turned to look at me. My grandfather told stories about this place, said it belongs to the Tornarsuk during the dark months, the ice devils. I'd heard the stories before. Every culture that lived near ice and snow had some version. The Inuit had the Mahaha, the Norse had the Hrimthursar, the Athabascans had the Tornarsuk, monsters that lived in the cold. Johnny, I don't have time for... Did you see them? He interrupted. I stopped. Did you? He asked again. I thought about the shape at the edge of the darkness, the tracks that changed, the hand frozen in the ice. I saw something. Johnny nodded slowly. Then we need to find your missing climbers and leave. Right now, before full dark. It's already full dark. No, he said, looking at the sky. This is twilight. Full dark is when the aurora comes. And it's coming tonight. I can feel it. We loaded up his snowmobile with rescue gear and headed north, following the massive tracks I'd seen earlier. Johnny drove, and I sat behind him, scanning the darkness with my headlamp. The tracks led us to a crevasse field, a maze of cracks in the ice, some narrow enough to step over, others wide enough to swallow a house. The tracks went right through the middle. We had to leave the snowmobile and walk. Stay close, Johnny said, and if I tell you to run, you run. Don't argue, don't ask questions, just run. The crevasses were deep and black, and my headlamp beam couldn't find the bottom. We picked our way across ice bridges, testing each step before putting our weight down. That's when I heard it, singing. A man's voice singing in German. It was coming from inside one of the crevasses. I crawled to the edge and looked down. 20 feet below, wedged between the ice walls, was one of the German climbers. He was alive, and he was singing. His eyes were open, staring straight up at me, but he didn't stop singing. Werner, I called down. Werner, can you hear me? He kept singing, the same verse, over and over. I started setting up a rope system to lower myself down, but Johnny grabbed my arm. Don't, he said. He's alive. Look at him. I looked. Werner's jacket was open. His shirt was pulled up, and his skin was blue. Not frostbite blue, but a deep crystal blue, like ice, and I could see through it. His ribs were visible through his translucent skin. His organs, dark shapes moving slowly inside his chest. His heart was beating, but it was beating wrong, too slow, like it was running down. What? What is that? He's changing, Johnny said, quietly. They're turning him into one of them. Werner stopped singing. His head turned, too far, like his neck had too many joints, and he looked right at me. Run, he said in perfect English. They're right behind you. We spun around. The darkness moved. Not shadows, the darkness itself. It pulled away from the ice and rocks and became shapes. Tall shapes. 9 feet tall, covered in white fur, with arms too long and legs that bent wrong. And their eyes. God, their eyes were blue, glowing blue, like someone had put LED lights inside empty skulls. There were 3 of them. They stood perfectly still, watching us. Johnny pulled out something from his jacket, a small leather pouch. He opened it and threw powder into the air. It caught fire, burning bright orange. The creatures stepped back, their eyes narrowing. Go, Johnny shouted. Back to the snowmobile. We ran. Behind us, I heard Werner start singing again. And then I heard other voices join in. Deeper voices, inhuman voices, harmonizing in a language that hurt my ears. We made it to the snowmobile. Johnny started it on the first try, thank God, and we roared away from the crevasse field. I looked back once. The creatures were following us. Not running, they didn't need to run. They were moving across the ice in a way that shouldn't be possible, their bodies flowing like liquid, appearing and disappearing with each heartbeat. And they were gaining. Johnny reached into his jacket and pulled out another pouch. "Take this," he shouted over the engine. "If they catch us, throw it at them and light it. Fire is the only thing they fear." I took the pouch just as one of the creatures appeared on the ice directly in front of us. Johnny swerved. The snowmobile's skis hit a drift, and we went airborne. We crashed hard. I rolled away from the machine, my shoulder screaming in pain. Johnny was up faster than me, pulling me to my feet. "The shelter," he pointed at the rock outcrop where I'd found Carl. "Get inside." We ran. Behind us, I could hear the snowmobile engine dying. Then I heard something else, the sound of metal being torn apart. They were destroying the machine, slowly, like they wanted us to hear it. We made it to the shelter and sealed ourselves inside. Johnny immediately started setting up a small camping stove, melting snow in a pot. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Making tea," he said. "Special tea. My grandmother's recipe. It'll keep us warm on the inside. They can't drain heat they can't touch." "How do you know?" He looked at me with tired eyes. "Because my grandfather was trapped up here during the dark month once. Only reason he survived was this tea and the fact that he stayed near a fire for 3 days straight until the sun came back. The sun isn't coming back for hours." "I know." We sat in silence, drinking the bitter tea. It burned going down, but I immediately felt warmer. Outside, something scratched at the canvas door. Long, slow scratches. Then a voice. Hans's voice, the dead German I'd found frozen, called out, "Help me, I'm so cold. Please let me in." Johnny threw more powder on the stove, and it flared bright. The scratching stopped, but we both knew they were still out there, waiting. We lasted 4 hours. 4 hours of sitting in that tiny shelter while things circled outside. 4 hours of hearing voices, some of them people I knew, people who'd died on this mountain years ago, calling my name. 4 hours of watching the canvas door flex inward, like something was pushing against it, testing it. Johnny told me everything during those 4 hours. The Tornarsuk were old, older than the mountain. They'd been here when the glaciers formed, when the world was ice from pole to pole. They lived in the deep cold, fed on warmth, not just body heat, but life itself. They could drain the warmth from a living thing in minutes, leave it frozen solid while its heart still beat. "Why don't people know about them?" I asked. "People used to know," Johnny said. "Every tribe that lived in the Arctic knew. That's why there are rules. Places you don't go in winter, times you don't travel, ceremonies you perform before hunting. White men came and called it all superstition." He smiled, but it was a sad smile. "Hard to blame them. Tornarsuk don't show themselves often. They sleep most of the time, deep in the ice. Only come out during the darkest months, when the sun is gone longest. Why now? Why this expedition? Climate change, maybe. The ice is melting, even up here. Their hunting grounds are shrinking. Or maybe they're just hungry." He poured more tea. "Germans broke taboo by camping here. This ridge is marked, has been for 500 years. They probably never saw the markers, or thought they were just rocks. How do we kill them? You don't. You survive them. You wait for the sun, or you drive them away with fire, or you become like them, and then you're not really alive anymore." A sound outside made us both freeze. Footsteps, heavy ones, right outside the door. Then a voice, my wife's voice. "Bear, baby, are you in there? I'm so cold. Please let me in." My hand moved toward the door before I could stop it. Johnny grabbed my wrist. "That's not her." "I know," I said, but part of me didn't know. Part of me heard my wife's voice and wanted to open the door, wanted to save her. "They get in your head," Johnny said. "They find what you love, what you fear, and they use it. Don't listen." The voice changed. Now it was my drill sergeant from Korea, the one who died next to me during a mortar attack. "On your feet, soldier. That's an order." I squeezed my eyes shut. The voice changed again and again. My mother, my dead father, a kid I couldn't save on a rescue 5 years ago. All of them begging to come in from the cold. Johnny threw more powder on the fire. The flames turned bright blue for a moment, and the voices stopped. "We can't stay here," I said. "They're getting bolder. Eventually they'll—" The canvas door ripped open. A creature stood in the opening. This close, I could see details I'd missed before. Its fur wasn't white. It was translucent, like glass fibers. Its skin underneath was that same ice blue, and I could see its bones and muscles moving beneath. Its face was almost human, but the proportions were wrong. Too long, too narrow, and its eyes looked right into me. I felt cold. Not the cold of the air. This was deeper. This was the cold of the grave, of the space between stars, of the final heat death of the universe. It smiled. Its teeth were icicles. Johnny threw the entire bag of powder at it and held up his lighter. "Back!" he shouted. The creature laughed, a sound like cracking glaciers, and stepped into the shelter. Johnny flicked the lighter. Nothing happened. The creature reached out with one long-fingered hand toward Johnny's face. I grabbed my ice axe and swung it into the creature's arm. The blade bit deep, but there was no blood. Instead, something like antifreeze leaked out, clear and thick and steaming in the cold. The creature looked at its arm, then at me. It tilted its head like a curious dog. Then it hit me. I flew backward out of the shelter and landed in the snow 20 feet away. Every rib on my left side felt broken. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The creature walked toward me. Behind it, I could see Johnny struggling with another one that had appeared from nowhere. This was it. This was how I died. Frozen on a mountain, turned into a crystal statue, or transformed into one of these things. But then I heard it. An engine. Dave's helicopter appeared over the ridge, spotlight blazing. The creature in front of me raised its arm to shield its eyes. Apparently they could be blinded, even if they could see in the dark. The helicopter dropped lower. Too low. Dangerous low for this altitude. Dave's voice crackled over my radio. "Bear, grab the rescue basket." The basket swung toward me. I forced myself to move, each breath like knives in my chest, and grabbed hold just as the creature lunged. The helicopter pulled up, hard, and I swung through the air, still holding the basket. Below me, I saw 6 of the creatures, all of them standing in a circle, looking up at me with their glowing blue eyes. Dave was shouting something about the engine, about the cold affecting the rotors, about how we had maybe 2 minutes before we dropped out of the sky. "Johnny," I screamed into my radio. "Where's Johnny?" Static, then, "I'm here." Johnny's voice, calm as always. "They got me, Bear. I'm already changing. I can feel it. But I did something first." "What? What did you do?" "I planted charges. All the explosives from the German camp. Set them up in the ice cave where they nest. Timers set for 3 minutes. We can still—" "No," he said. "We can't. But you can. You can make sure nobody else comes up here during the dark months. You can tell people what's really up here." The helicopter gained altitude. My radio signal was getting weaker. "Johnny, It's okay, Bear. Tell my daughter I was brave. Tell her the old stories were real." The transmission cut out. 2 minutes later, Still hanging from the basket as Dave struggled to keep the helicopter in the air, I saw the mountain light up. The explosion wasn't like a bomb. It was more like the ice itself split open. A crack that spread and spread and spread, and then a section of the north face just fell. Thousands of tons of ice and rock sliding down into the crevasses, sealing them, burying everything inside. They said it was an avalanche. Natural occurrence, tragic but not unexpected given the extreme weather conditions. 3 German climbers dead, 1 survivor with severe frostbite. 1 Athabascan guide, presumed dead in the avalanche, body never recovered. I spent 3 weeks in the hospital. Broken ribs, punctured lung, severe frostbite on my fingers and toes. They saved the digits barely, but I can't feel them anymore when it gets cold. Or maybe I just feel cold all the time now. Karl, the German survivor, was deported back to Germany. Last I heard, he was in a psychiatric facility near Munich. Keeps talking about ice devils and blue eyes. Nobody believes him. The official Park Service report listed it as an equipment failure and extreme weather event. My report, the real one, where I described what actually happened, was classified. Not destroyed, classified, which meant someone somewhere believed me, or at least believed it was possible. I retired from high-altitude rescue work, took a desk job coordinating search and rescue operations from the warm office at park headquarters. Sarah was relieved. She said I'd been having nightmares, waking up screaming about the cold. I don't remember the nightmares, but I believe her. What I do remember is spending the next year researching, not just Athabascan legends, but Inuit stories, Norse mythology, accounts from Antarctic expeditions, old papers from Russian gulags in Siberia. Every culture that ever lived in deep cold had stories about things that hunted in the darkness, and the stories all matched. Details varied, but the core was the same. Creatures that lived in ice. Creatures that fed on warmth. Creatures that came out during the long dark. I found Johnny's daughter, a teacher in Fairbanks, and told her what her father did. Told her he was brave. Told her he saved my life. She gave me her grandmother's journals, handwritten in Athabascan and English, full of recipes and stories and warnings, including the recipe for the tea that kept us warm from the inside. I also found something else in those journals, a map. It marked locations all over Alaska, places where the Tornarsuk nested, places to avoid during winter. Some I recognized, high peaks, deep valleys, glacier fields. Others were new to me. There were 47 marked sites. We'd only destroyed 1. I started keeping track after that. Hypothermia deaths that didn't make sense. Hikers found frozen in summer. Bodies with that distinctive blue tint under the skin. Most were labeled as accidents, but I knew better. 3 incidents the first year, 5 the next, 7 the year after that. They were getting more active. Climate change, I think. Johnny was right about that. The permafrost is melting, the glaciers are retreating, and the deep cold places, the places where these things sleep, are shrinking. They're getting pushed into smaller territories, getting desperate, getting hungry. I'm 62 now, 18 years past that February night. I train rangers in cold weather survival, but I also teach them other things. Things that aren't in the manual. How to recognize the signs. What to do if the silence gets too quiet. Why you should never camp in certain valleys during winter. Most of them think I'm just a paranoid old man. But some of them listen. Some of them have seen things they can't explain. Some of them have felt that deep cold that goes beyond temperature. Those ones, I give them grandmother's tea recipe and a map with 46 locations marked on it. Last month I got a call from a ranger in Wrangell, St. Elias. Young guy, former Marine, reminded me of myself. He'd found a camp, 3 tents perfectly arranged, completely empty. Tracks in the snow that changed from boots to something else. "What do I do?" he asked. I looked at my map. The location he described was marked with a red circle. "You leave," I told him. "Right now. Don't try to rescue anyone. Don't try to investigate. Get off that mountain before dark." "But trust me," I said. "Some things you can't fight. Some things you just have to survive." He made it out. Lost some gear, abandoned the camp, but he made it out alive. He called me later, said he saw something at the edge of his vision as he was leaving. Something tall and white with eyes that glowed blue in the darkness. Said it was watching him, waiting. "What do you think it wanted?" he asked. I looked out my office window at the mountain, Mount McKinley, looming over everything, white and pristine and beautiful, and deadly. "It wanted you to know," I said, "that this is their mountain, has been for thousands of years, will be for thousands more, and that we're only visitors here." "What happens when we stop being visitors?" he asked. "When we build more, develop more, warm the planet more, when their hunting grounds are all gone." I didn't have an answer for that, because I didn't want to think about what happens when ancient predators run out of wilderness, when they have nowhere left to hunt but our towns, our cities, our homes. Sarah found me standing at the window, staring at the mountain. She put her hand on my shoulder, and I jumped. I always jump now at unexpected touches. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I lied. "Just thinking." "About that night?" "Always about that night." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Do you ever wonder if you imagined it? If it was just the cold and the altitude and the stress?" I touched my numb fingers. Thought about Johnny's voice on the radio. Thought about Carl in his psychiatric facility. Thought about Hans's frozen face, locked in eternal terror. "Every day," I said. "I hope I imagined it." "But you don't think you did?" "No," I said, "I don't." Because 18 years later, on the coldest nights, when the aurora lights up the sky and the temperature drops below zero, I can still feel them out there, waiting in the darkness, watching from the ice, and getting hungrier. The mountain has its own rules, and some of them were written before humans learned to make fire. I learned that the hard way. I just hope everyone else figures it out before it's too late. Because the ice remembers, and the ice never forgives. My name is Kit Donnelly, and I've been a ranger at gates of the Arctic National Park for 14 years. That's long enough to know that hungry is just a feeling. Your stomach growls, you eat something, problem solved. But in January of 1982, I learned what real hunger looks like when it walks across the ice on 2 legs. People ask me why I came to Alaska. The truth is, I was running. 7 years before this story starts, my entire family died in a house fire back in Boston. Mom, Dad, 2 sisters, even our dog. I was the only one who wasn't home that night. After the funerals, I joined the Peace Corps just to get away from everything that reminded me of them. When that ended, Alaska seemed far enough, empty enough, cold enough to match how I felt inside. Gates of the Arctic is America's most remote national park. No roads lead here, no trails cut through it. During winter, the sun doesn't rise for 65 days straight. Just darkness, cold that can hit 70 below zero, and 6 million acres of nothing but mountains, ice, and whatever moves through the shadows between them. I'm good at my job because I had to be. The Inupiat people who've lived here for thousands of years taught me things my ranger training never covered. how to navigate by stars during the polar night, how to read animal tracks in wind-blown snow, how to respect the land because it doesn't care if you live or die. Moses Kanguk, an elder from Anaktuvuk Pass, spent 2 winters showing me the old ways. He never talked down to me for being white, just tested me until he was satisfied I'd listen. The Inupiat have stories about these mountains, legends about things that hunt during the darkest months. I always figured they were metaphors, warnings about starvation, about respecting the cold, about not going out alone. Smart survival advice wrapped in supernatural tales. Moses would smile when I said that, like he knew something I didn't. "You think our ancestors were stupid?" he asked me once. "You think they made up stories about monsters just to scare children?" "I think they didn't understand what they saw," I said. "Starvation causes hallucinations. Hypothermia makes people see things." He just nodded and changed the subject. I thought I'd won that argument. The call came in on January 15th. A hunting party from Anaktuvuk Pass had gone out to the traditional caribou grounds 70 miles north of the village. 5 experienced hunters, all of them born in the Brooks Range, all of them raised on the ice. They'd been out for 3 days when their emergency beacon activated. The signal was strong, which meant they were alive, but they weren't answering their radio. "Something's wrong," Moses told me when he called. His voice sounded different. Scared, maybe, though I'd never heard him scared before. They wouldn't activate the beacon unless it was bad, and they wouldn't stay silent unless they couldn't talk. "Could be radio malfunction," I said. "Happens all the time in this cold." "All 5 radios?" Moses asked. "Kit, these men know this land. They know the weather, the ice, the animals. If something stopped them from coming home, it's not something normal." I told him I'd fly out at first light to check on them. He was quiet for a long moment. "The aurora has been red for 3 nights, he finally said. "Not green. Red, like blood on snow. My grandmother saw that once when she was a girl. She said the ice was hungry that winter." "Moses, I'm coming with you," he said. "You'll need someone who remembers the old protections." I didn't argue, partly because having Moses along made any wilderness trip safer, and partly because the tone in his voice made the hair on my neck stand up. We left before dawn, which in January means we left in darkness that felt like it would last forever. My snowmobile's headlight cut through the black, showing nothing but snow and more snow. Moses rode behind me, silent except when he needed to point out a landmark I couldn't see, a rock formation, a frozen stream, a ridge that marked clan hunting boundaries from 1,000 years ago. The temperature was 45 below zero, the kind of cold that makes your breath freeze in the air before it can blow away, the kind that kills you in minutes if your engine dies and you can't get it started again. We found the hunting camp 2 hours after sunrise, except sunrise is the wrong word when the sun doesn't actually rise. The sky got lighter, going from black to deep blue to a weird purple-gray that passes for daylight up here in winter. The aurora was already visible, rippling across the northern horizon like curtains in a window. And Moses was right. It was red. Not the usual green or yellow. Red, like someone had spilled paint across the sky. The camp looked normal at first. 5 tents arranged in a circle, traditional style. 3 snowmobiles parked together. A fire pit in the center with frozen wood stacked beside it. Everything exactly where it should be, except it was completely silent. No dogs barking, no generator running, no voices calling out to ask who we were. I killed my engine and listened. Nothing. just wind moving across ice and the weird electronic hum of the aurora overhead. "Stay close," Moses said quietly. He pulled a small leather pouch from inside his parka and hung it around his neck. I'd seen him wear it before, some kind of traditional protection charm. I'd always thought it was just cultural tradition. Now I noticed his hands were shaking as he tied it. We walked into camp together. The snow around the tents was marked with footprints, but they were confused, going in circles, doubling back, running in directions that made no sense. Like everyone had been running around in panic. The first tent was empty. Sleeping bags laid out neat, gear organized, nothing disturbed. Same with the second tent. The third tent made my stomach drop. Food was set out on a camp table. 5 bowls of caribou stew, still frozen but clearly meant to be eaten. 5 spoons laid beside 5 bowls. Steam would have been rising from it when they stopped, when they all stood up and walked away from a hot meal in 40 below weather. Nobody leaves hot food in the Arctic. You don't waste calories and you don't waste heat. It goes against every survival instinct a person develops up here. "They heard something," Moses said. He was staring at the table like it was a grave marker, something that made them forget they were hungry. I walked to the tent entrance and looked out at the footprints again. Now that I knew what to look for, I could see it clearly. 5 sets of prints all running in the same direction. Away from camp, toward the old burial ground that Moses had once told me was forbidden during winter. And beyond the human footprints, I saw something else. Prints that started out looking almost human. Long feet, 5 toes. But every few steps they changed. The toes got longer, the prints got deeper, and by the time they reached the edge of camp, they weren't human anymore. They were claws, driven deep into frozen ground that should have been too hard to mark. Whatever made those tracks was heavy, hungry, and hunting. "Moses," I said quietly, "what walks on 2 legs in the Brooks Range?" He didn't answer. He was staring at the tracks too, and his face had gone completely white. "Moses, what makes tracks like that?" He finally looked at me. In 14 years, I'd never seen him look afraid. Now his eyes were wide, and his breathing was fast. "The windigo of the ice," he whispered. "The hunger that walks. It should be sleeping. It should be..." He stopped, shook his head. "Kit, we need to leave, right now. We need to get back to the village and bring..." The aurora flared bright red overhead, so bright it hurt to look at. And somewhere out in the darkness beyond our sight, something screamed. It sounded like my sister. It sounded exactly like Sarah screaming for help the way she must have screamed in the fire. I started running toward the sound before I could think. Moses grabbed my arm, his grip so tight it hurt through my parka. "That's not real," he hissed. "Kit, that's not your sister. It's the hunger. It's trying to separate us." But it sounded so much like her, so much like Sarah calling my name. "Please," Moses said. His voice cracked. "Please, Kit, we have to go." The scream came again, closer this time, and underneath it, I heard something else, something that sounded like breathing, like something huge taking slow, patient breaths in the darkness just beyond where our eyes could see. My radio crackled to life on my belt, static at first, then a voice speaking Inupiat, but in a dialect Moses had once told me hadn't been spoken in 300 years. "It's awake," Moses whispered. "God help us. The ice is hungry and it's awake." We ran back to the snowmobiles. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely turn the key. Moses climbed on behind me and grabbed my waist tight enough to bruise. "Go," he said. "Don't look back. Don't stop. Just go." The engine caught on the third try. I gunned it, spinning snow behind us as we tore out of camp. My headlight showed the way ahead, flat white snow stretching into purple-gray darkness. Behind us, I swear I could hear footsteps, big ones, getting closer. "The village is 2 hours," Moses shouted over the engine. "We can make it if—" My snowmobile died, just cut out completely, like someone had flipped a switch. I twisted the key, pumped the throttle, tried everything I knew. Nothing. The engine was completely dead. "No, no, no," I muttered, climbing off to check the fuel line. Full tank. Spark plugs looked fine. Everything looked fine. There was no mechanical reason for it to die. Moses's radio crackled. More of that ancient dialect, speaking words that sounded like they were made of wind and ice. He yanked the radio off his belt and threw it into the snow. "It's calling to them," he said. His voice was steady now, like he'd moved past fear into some kind of calm acceptance. "The hunters. It's already started feeding on them. That's why they didn't answer. They can't anymore. Moses, what the hell is out here?" He looked at me for a long moment. Then he pulled out a flashlight and pointed it at our back trail. The footprints following us were visible in the snow. They'd started maybe 50 yards behind the camp, two-legged, human-sized at first. But with each print, they got longer, deeper. The feet were changing as whatever made them walked, like its bones were rearranging themselves as it moved. And our snowmobile tracks? They went right past where those footprints started, which meant whatever was following us had been standing there invisible when we drove by. "The Wendigo of the ice," Moses said quietly. "My grandmother told me stories. Her grandmother told her. Goes back generations, all the way to the first people who came to these mountains. It's a starvation spirit. It hunts during the dark months when food is scarce and people are desperate. It feeds on flesh, but it feeds on fear and despair first. Makes its victims so hungry they'll do anything, eat anything, even each other." "That's not real," I said automatically. "Starvation causes hallucinations, psychological breakdown." "Then explain the tracks, Kit. Explain how 5 experienced hunters abandoned a hot meal and walked into the dark. Explain how your perfectly maintained snowmobile just died for no reason." His voice got harder. "Explain how that thing knew your sister's voice." I couldn't. I had no explanation that made sense. "How do we fight it?" I asked. "The old way," Moses said. "Fire, ceremony, traditional protections that my people have used for 1,000 years. But we'd need materials from camp, and we'd need time to prepare, and—" Something moved in the darkness ahead of us. Just a shape at first, barely visible against the snow. Then it stepped into the edge of my flashlight beam. It looked like a man, tall, thin, wearing winter clothes, but wrong, all wrong. The proportions weren't human, arms too long, legs bent at angles that shouldn't work, and its face, when it turned toward us, was too narrow, too many teeth showing in what might have been a smile. "Samuel," Moses whispered. "Samuel Akmanik." The thing wearing Samuel's clothes took another step forward. Its movements were jerky, puppet-like. When it opened its mouth, the voice that came out was all wrong. Too deep, too hollow, like someone speaking from the bottom of a well. "Hungry," it said in English. "So hungry. Please, food. Any food." "Samuel's one of the hunters," Moses said to me. "He's my cousin's son, 23 years old. Best tracker in the village." "Moses, that's not Samuel anymore." But Moses was already moving forward. "Samuel, it's Uncle Moses. Let me help you. Let me—" Samuel's head twisted around too far, completely backward, neck rotating like an owl. His eyes were white, completely white, no iris, no pupil, just white orbs that somehow still saw us. "It hurts," Samuel said. His voice came out in that same wrong register. "The hunger hurts so much. Please, I need. His jaw unhinged like a snake's. Wider, wider, until his mouth was big enough to fit a basketball. Inside I saw teeth, rows and rows of them, going back into his throat like a shark's mouth. Moses grabbed my arm and yanked me backward just as Samuel lunged. He moved fast, faster than anything human should move. 1 second he was 10 feet away. The next he was right in front of us, those impossibly long arms reaching for Moses's face. I pulled my pistol and fired 3 times. Center mass, the way I'd been trained. All 3 shots hit. I saw the impact through Samuel's coat. He didn't even slow down. Moses pulled out a small pouch of something and threw it in Samuel's face. Powder, some kind of ground herbs. Samuel shrieked, an awful sound that was part human scream and part animal howl, and stumbled backward. The skin where the powder touched was smoking. "Run," Moses said. "The second snowmobile, go." We ran. Behind us, Samuel was making noises that didn't sound human anymore. Growling, clicking, something that sounded like bones breaking and reforming. The second snowmobile started on the first try. Moses jumped on behind me as I gunned it. I looked back once as we pulled away. Samuel was on all 4s now, his spine bent backward in a way that should have snapped it. He was moving fast, scuttling across the snow like a spider. And behind him, in the darkness, I saw more shapes. 4 of them, the other hunters, all moving the same wrong way. And behind all of them, something bigger, much bigger. I only caught a glimpse. 12 feet tall, maybe, skin like old leather stretched over bones, eyes that glowed red in the aurora light. It was watching us go with what looked like amusement, like it was letting us run because the chase was part of the fun. "How far to the village?" I shouted over the engine. 90 miles, Moses shouted back. "But Kit, we can't lead it there. If it reaches the village, if it gets among the families, the children, then what do we do?" He was quiet for a moment, then, "The old ceremonial site, 5 miles north. It's a sacred place. Protected ground, we might be able to hold it off long enough to perform the banishment ritual." "Might? It's the only chance we have." I turned the snowmobile north, toward the ceremonial site. Behind us, I could hear howling. 5 voices, all of them once human, all of them hungry now, always hungry. And above it all, the aurora burned blood red across the sky. The ceremonial site was a circle of stones on a ridge overlooking a frozen valley. The Inupiat had been using it for longer than anyone could remember. Vision quests, coming-of-age ceremonies, important tribal decisions. Moses said it was one of the most spiritually protected places in the Brooks Range. Looking at it now, just a bunch of rocks in the snow, I had a hard time believing it would stop whatever was hunting us. We pulled into the circle and killed the engine. Moses immediately started gathering materials from his pack. A small leather bag of the same powder he'd thrown at Samuel. A knife with a handle carved from caribou bone. Something wrapped in cloth that he handled carefully. "The ritual requires fire," he said, working fast. "A specific kind. We need to burn caribou fat, dried sage, and this." He unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a bundle of feathers and what looked like dried meat. Part of my grandmother's death bundle. It's been in my family for 6 generations. "Moses, I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm choosing." He started arranging the materials in a pattern inside the stone circle. The Wendigo preys on the weak, the desperate, the isolated, but it fears the old ways, fears the protections our ancestors learned through blood and sacrifice. If I can complete the ceremony, it can't cross into this circle. We'll be safe until daylight. And then? He didn't answer. just kept working. I pulled out my pistol and checked the magazine. 15 rounds left. Not that bullets seemed to do anything against these things, but it made me feel better to hold it. The howling was getting closer. I could see shapes moving in the darkness below the ridge. 5 of them, the transformed hunters, circling the base of the hill like wolves. Behind them, that bigger shape, the source, the thing that had turned them. "How long do you need?" I asked Moses. 10 minutes to prepare, 5 to perform. He pulled out a lighter and started trying to get the fire going. In this cold, with this wind, it wasn't easy. "So, 15 minutes. If nothing interrupts me, yes." Something interrupted him. A voice from the darkness. My sister's voice. "Kit? Kit, I'm so cold. Please help me. It hurts so much." I knew it wasn't real. I knew Sarah had died 7 years ago. But God, it sounded exactly like her. Same tone, same inflection, same way she used to say my name when she was scared. "Don't listen," Moses said sharply. "It's using your memories against you. Whatever it shows you, whatever it says, it's not real." More voices now. My mother, my father, my little sister Katie. All of them calling my name. All of them begging for help, screaming about the fire, about the heat, about how much it hurt. I closed my eyes and covered my ears, but I could still hear them. Then the voices stopped. Just stopped. I opened my eyes. One of the transformed hunters was standing at the edge of the stone circle. Not Samuel. This one had been a bigger man. I recognized the coat. Jacob Paniatak, Moses' cousin. He'd taught me how to make snow shelter on my second winter here. Jacob's eyes were white like Samuel's. His mouth hung open too wide, showing too many teeth. But he wasn't attacking, just standing there, looking at us with those blank eyes. "Uncle," Jacob said. His voice was his own, mostly. A little off, a little hollow, but recognizably Jacob. "Uncle Moses, please, it hurts. The hunger hurts so much. Help me." Moses' hands stopped moving on the ritual materials. "Jacob, don't," I warned. "Moses, it's not really him. I'm still here," Jacob said. His voice cracked. "Part of me is still here. But I'm so hungry, Uncle. So hungry it's eating me from the inside. Please, I just need a little food. Just a little. Then I'll be okay. Then I'll be Jacob again." A tear ran down Moses' face. "I can't help you, nephew. I'm sorry." "Just a bite," Jacob said. He took a step closer to the circle. "One bite. I wouldn't hurt you. You know me. You know I wouldn't hurt family." He took another step. His foot crossed the line of stones. Moses threw a handful of powder at him. Jacob screamed, that awful mixed sound of human and not human, and stumbled back. His skin was smoking where the powder touched. He fell to his knees, clawing at his face. "I'm sorry," Moses whispered. "I'm so sorry, Jacob." Jacob's head snapped up. The human expression was gone. Now there was just hunger, pure, mindless, eternal hunger. He opened his mouth impossibly wide and charged. I fired. 3 shots, all center mass. Jacob went down hard, for about 2 seconds. Then he started getting back up. The bullet wounds were already closing, the flesh knitting together like it had never been torn. "They can't be killed like this," Moses said. He was back to working on the fire, hands shaking. "Not by normal weapons. The only way to free them is to banish the entity that's controlling them. Then work faster." The other transformed hunters were approaching now. Samuel, Jacob, and 3 others I didn't recognize. All of them moving in that wrong, jerky way. All of them hungry. Behind them, the big one finally stepped into the light. It was 12 feet tall, maybe more. Skin like old leather, gray-white and stretched too tight over bones that pressed against it from the inside. Arms that hung down past its knees. legs bent backward at the knee like an animal's. And its face. God, its face. Mostly human, but wrong. Too narrow, too long, with a mouth full of yellowed teeth that looked like they'd been filed to points. Its eyes glowed red in the aurora light, not reflecting it, glowing like there was fire inside its skull. The Wendigo of the ice. It looked at me, and I felt its gaze like a physical weight, like someone pressing down on my chest, squeezing the air from my lungs. It didn't speak, but somehow I heard its voice in my head. Hungry, always hungry. Feed, must feed. Moses, almost ready, just need. The fire won't catch. The wind is too. The Wendigo raised one long arm and pointed at the sky. The aurora flared brighter. The wind picked up, howling across the ridge. Temperature dropped. I could feel it even through my parka. 10 degrees, 20, 30. My face went numb. Moses's lighter guttered out. He tried again. Nothing. Again. Nothing. His hands were shaking too badly now, fingers going stiff from the cold. I can't. Kit, I can't get it started. The 5 transformed hunters started climbing toward us, not rushing, just walking steadily. They had time. We weren't going anywhere. I looked around desperately for something, anything we could use, and I saw it. Moses's snowmobile, still full of fuel. The gas tank, I said. We can use the gas to start the fire. It won't burn right. The ceremony requires specific materials burned in a specific way. It's fire or nothing. You said the Wendigo fears fire, so let's give it fire. Moses hesitated for just a second, then nodded. I ran to the snowmobile and yanked the fuel line loose. Gas poured out onto the snow. I grabbed the lighter from Moses and clicked it. Once, twice. The transformed hunters were 20 feet away now. I could smell them, rot and old meat and something else, something that made my stomach turn over. Third click. The lighter caught. I dropped it into the gas. The fire bloomed up so fast and hot it knocked me backward. The snowmobile went up like a bomb, flames shooting 30 feet into the air. Heat washed over the ridge, so intense it hurt even through the cold. The transformed hunters screamed and stumbled backward, their skin blistering from the heat. The Wendigo itself froze, its red eyes fixed on the flames. And for the first time since this nightmare started, it looked uncertain. Moses grabbed the materials and threw them into the fire. They caught immediately, burning with colors that weren't natural, green and blue and purple mixed with the orange flames. Now, Moses said. He started chanting in Inupiat, words I didn't understand, in a rhythm that seemed to sync with my heartbeat. He was swaying, eyes half closed, completely focused on the ritual. The Wendigo roared. The sound was so loud it hurt, so deep I felt it in my bones. It started walking toward us. Not the jerky puppet movement of the transformed hunters. This was deliberate, purposeful. Each step left footprints 2 feet deep in frozen ground. Moses, don't break the circle, he said, still chanting. Whatever happens, don't leave the stones. The Wendigo reached the edge of the firelight. Up close, it was even worse. I could see that its skin wasn't leather. It was frozen flesh, preserved by the cold. I could see old scars, old injuries that had never healed right. I could see its ribs through its skin, each one visible like it had been starved for 1,000 years. It reached one long arm toward Moses, claws like knives extended from its fingers. I stepped between them and fired, every bullet I had left. 11 shots, straight into that nightmare face. The bullets hit. They made holes. I saw them tear through that frozen flesh, and I watched the holes close, watched the flesh knit back together, watched it heal like I'd done nothing at all. The Wendigo looked at me. Its mouth moved into what might have been a smile. Then it spoke. Not in my head this time, out loud, in a voice like wind through a grave. "You can't kill hunger," it said. "Hunger lives forever." It grabbed me by the throat and lifted me off the ground like I weighed nothing. I couldn't breathe. The Wendigo's grip was like iron around my throat. My vision started to narrow, darkness creeping in from the edges. I could hear Moses still chanting, faster now, more urgent. The Wendigo's face was inches from mine. Its breath smelled like decay, like meat that had been rotting in the sun for weeks. It opened its mouth and I saw down its throat. Just darkness, going down and down forever. Nothing inside, just endless empty hunger. "You understand now," it said in that wind voice. "This is what waits for all of you, all humans. Hunger, empty, always wanting, never satisfied. I am what you become when you stop pretending to be full." My hand fumbled at my belt, found the knife I used for gutting fish, pulled it free, stabbed up into the Wendigo's wrist. The blade went in deep. The Wendigo didn't even flinch, just looked at the knife sticking out of its arm like it was mildly interesting. Then its grip loosened. Not much, just enough for me to suck in half a breath. It tilted its head, studying me. "You fought," it said, "even knowing you would fail, even knowing it would hurt. This is what I hunt for. This is what tastes best. The moment when hope dies and despair takes its place." Behind me, Moses's chanting reached a crescendo. The fire burned brighter, the strange colors intensifying. The aurora overhead swirled and pulsed in time with the words. The Wendigo looked past me at Moses. Something like concern crossed its face. It threw me, just tossed me away like garbage. I hit the ground hard 15 feet away, outside the stone circle. The impact knocked the wind out of me. I tried to get up, tried to crawl back toward the circle, but my body wasn't working right. The Wendigo strode toward Moses. The 5 transformed hunters followed, moving in sync like a pack. Moses didn't stop chanting. His eyes were closed now, completely focused on the ritual. The fire in front of him was burning without fuel, flames rising from nothing but stone and air. The Wendigo reached for him and stopped. It couldn't cross the line of fire. Its hand hit something invisible, something that pushed back. It tried again, pressing harder. The air between its hand and the flames shimmered like heat haze. Moses opened his eyes. His voice got louder, the Inupiat words flowing faster. He pulled out the knife with the caribou bone handle and cut his own palm. Blood dripped into the fire. The flames turned completely blue. The Wendigo screamed. The sound was so loud that ice cracked on the ridge around us. The transformed hunters all screamed too, their voices harmonizing with their master's rage. "You think your small magic can hold me?" the Wendigo roared. "I have hunted these mountains for 10,000 years. I was here before your people learned to make fire. I will be here when the last human starves and the world goes cold." Moses kept chanting, kept bleeding into the fire. The blue flames grew brighter, taller. The Wendigo tried to circle around, looking for a gap in the protection. There wasn't one. The fire formed a complete barrier, so it changed tactics. It turned to look at me. I was still outside the circle, still trying to crawl back. "You want to save him?" it asked. "Then come here. Let me take you instead. One life for another. That's fair, isn't it?" "Kit, don't listen," Moses shouted without breaking his chant. "Stay where you are." But I wasn't in the circle. I wasn't protected. The 5 transformed hunters were already moving toward me. I tried to stand, made it to my knees before Samuel reached me. He grabbed my arm with 2 strong fingers and pulled me up. His white eyes stared into mine. "Join us. he said in that hollow voice. It doesn't hurt once you stop fighting. Just give in. Be hungry, be empty, be free. The other transformed hunters surrounded me. Jacob, Thomas, Peter, Mary. I hadn't realized one of the hunters had been a woman. They all reached for me with hands that were more claw than human. Moses stopped chanting for just a second. Kit. That second was all the Wendigo needed. The blue flames flickered. The barrier wavered. The Wendigo lunged through the gap. Moses tried to restart the chant, but he was too slow. The Wendigo's hand closed around his throat just like it had done to me. It lifted him up, his feet dangling 2 feet off the ground. Old magic, the Wendigo hissed. Old protections. Your grandmother knew them. Her grandmother knew them. Back and back and back. But you missed something. You forgot the most important part. What? Moses choked out. Sacrifice, the Wendigo said. The old ceremony requires a willing sacrifice, someone who offers themselves to save the others. Without that, it's just fire and words. It looked at me. The transformed hunters were pulling me closer, dragging me toward the circle. So here's my offer, the Wendigo said. One of you dies. Right now, I feed. The other one lives. I let them go. I leave the village alone for 10 more years. It smiled with too many teeth. Choose, the old man or the outsider. Who dies tonight? Take me, I said immediately. Let him go. Take me. Kit, no. Moses gasped. I'm serious, I said. Moses has family. The village needs him. I'm nobody. I came here to die anyway. I've been dying since the fire. Just let him complete the ritual. Let him protect the others. Then you can have me. The Wendigo's red eyes gleamed. You would sacrifice yourself, knowing what comes after, knowing I'll keep you alive and aware while I feed, knowing you'll stay conscious for every bite, every piece I tear away. I thought about Sarah, about how she must have screamed in the fire while I wasn't there to help her, about 7 years of guilt and grief and wishing I'd been home that night. Yes, I said. I'll do it. The Wendigo studied me for a long moment. Then it started laughing. The sound was awful, dry and hollow, like wind through dead trees. Finally, it said, after 10,000 years of hunting, someone finally understands. This is what I wanted, what I've always wanted. Not just flesh, not just fear, true sacrifice, true understanding of what hunger means. It dropped Moses. He fell to his knees, gasping. Complete your ritual, the Wendigo said to him. Protect your village. This one is mine now. Moses looked at me. Tears were streaming down his face. Kit, do it, I said. Finish it. Don't let this be for nothing. He hesitated for just a second. Then he grabbed the materials and threw them back into the fire, started chanting again, his voice raw and broken but determined. The transformed hunters pulled me toward the Wendigo. It reached out one long arm, claws extending. And I remembered something Moses had said once, months ago, while we were watching the aurora. We'd been talking about death, about what comes after. My grandmother said death songs have power, he'd told me. The dying person sings, and the song shapes how they're remembered. It shapes what they leave behind. A good death song can protect the living long, after the singer is gone. I didn't know any death songs, but I knew Sarah's favorite lullaby, the one Mom used to sing to her when she couldn't sleep. I started singing it. Off-key, voice shaking, but I sang. The Wendigo froze. What are you doing? It asked. I kept singing. The words were simple, a children's song about stars and dreams and being safe at night. But I put everything into it. All my grief over Sarah, all my love for my family, all the years of guilt and pain and wishing I could have saved them. Behind me, Moses' chanting got stronger. The blue flames roared higher. Stop, the Wendigo said. It sounded uncertain for the first time. "Stop that." I sang louder, because I understood now. The Wendigo fed on despair, on fear, on the death of hope. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't despairing. I was offering myself willingly, with love, to protect others. That wasn't the kind of death it could feed on. The transformed hunters started to pull back. Their grip. My name is Jennifer McLeod, but everyone up here calls me Storm. I've been a ranger at the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge for 16 years now, and in that time I've seen things that would make most people pack up and head back to civilization. Grizzlies tearing through camp supplies, wolves circling helicopters, temperatures so cold your spit freezes before it hits the ground. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened in March of 1988. Before I came to Alaska, I was an engineer at NASA. I spent 5 years studying electromagnetic fields and auroral physics, trying to understand why the northern lights danced the way they did. It was all mathematics and particle physics to me. Beautiful, yes, but no more magical than a sunset or a rainbow. Just charged particles from the sun colliding with our atmosphere. Then I met my husband Tom, who was doing research up here. We got married, moved to Alaska, and I thought I'd continue my science work in the field. But something changed when I saw what the oil companies wanted to do to this place. How they wanted to drill and destroy one of the last truly wild places on Earth. So I became a ranger instead. Traded my lab coat for a parka. Started protecting caribou instead of studying electrons. The Inupiat elders thought it was funny. The scientist lady who didn't believe in their stories. They'd sit around fires and talk about the Arsarnarit, the aurora spirits that hunted when the lights came down. I'd smile politely and think about plasma physics, old stories to explain things they didn't understand. I never judged them for it. My grandmother in Scotland told stories about Kelpies and Selkies. Every culture has its myths. I should have listened better. It was early March when the call came in. A research team from the University of Alaska had set up a monitoring station about 60 miles north of our headquarters, right on the coastal plain where the permafrost meets the Arctic Ocean. They were studying auroral activity, trying to predict patterns. Good people. I knew the team leader, Dr. Sarah Chen. We'd worked together on a caribou migration study the year before. They'd stopped responding to radio checks 2 days ago. Their automated equipment was still transmitting data, but no human voices came through. Just static, and sometimes something that sounded almost like music. Probably just radio trouble, my supervisor said. But go check it out. Take the helicopter. The flight out took 40 minutes. Below us, the tundra stretched flat and white, broken only by the occasional dark line of a frozen river. March in the Arctic is a strange time. We're transitioning from the polar night back to daylight, so you get these long twilights that never quite become day or night. Everything exists in this blue-gray in-between state. The pilot, a guy named Jack, who'd been flying in Alaska for 20 years, kept checking his instruments. "Compass is acting weird," he said. "Must be all that electromagnetic equipment they've got running out there." But I could see his jaw was tight. Jack didn't spook easily. The research station came into view. A cluster of 3 small buildings and several tall antenna arrays. The helicopter's skids crunched on the snow, and Jack kept the rotors running. "I'll wait here," he said. 30 minutes, then I'm coming to find you." I grabbed my pack and headed toward the main building. The first thing I noticed was the silence. No generator hum, no voices, just wind and the distant crack of ice. The second thing I noticed was the light. Even though it was barely afternoon, the sky had this weird greenish tint to it. Not quite aurora. The northern lights don't usually appear during daylight, and definitely not this early in the season. But there it was, a faint shimmer hanging in the air like oil on water. The station door was unlocked. Inside, everything looked normal. Coffee cups on the table, half-finished meals in the small kitchen, sleeping bags laid out in the bunks, equipment racks humming with power, so the generator was working fine, just quieter than usual. But no people. I checked the logbook. The last entry was from Sarah 3 days ago. Aurora activity increasing. Magnetic readings off scale. This is incredible. Going outside to get better readings on portable unit. That was it. Nothing after. I grabbed the radio. "Jack, you there?" Static, then his voice distorted. "Copy. Find anything?" "Station's abandoned. Equipment's running, but..." The radio squealed. A high-pitched tone that made me yank the headset away from my ear. When it faded, I could hear something underneath the static. Musical notes, almost. Rising and falling in patterns that seemed deliberate. "Storm? Storm, you're breaking up. Can you..." Jack's voice dissolved into the same musical static. I tried again. Nothing but those sounds, like someone was playing an instrument made of electricity. That's when I saw the footprints outside the window. Boot prints in the snow, leading away from the station toward the ice. I followed them, counting. 5 sets of prints. The whole research team. The prints led north for about 100 yards. Then they just stopped. Not at a snowbank or a vehicle. Not at a hole in the ice or a cliff edge. They simply ended all 5 sets, as if the people making them had been lifted straight up into the sky. The snow around the last prints was disturbed, though. Melted in strange patterns, refrozen into crystalline formations I'd never seen before. When I knelt to examine them, my exposed skin tingled. The same feeling you get when you touch a TV screen, that little static shock. I stood up and looked around. The sky was getting darker, but that green shimmer was getting brighter. The aurora was starting to dance, ribbons of light twisting against the twilight. Beautiful, mesmerizing, and completely impossible. Aurora borealis doesn't work like this. It happens in the upper atmosphere, 60 to 200 miles up. It doesn't come down to ground level. It can't. But as I watched, one ribbon seemed to reach down, stretching toward the earth like a finger pointing. My radio crackled. Not Jack's voice this time, not static. Words, barely audible, in a voice that sounded like Sarah's but somehow wrong, drawn out and echoing. "Storm, the lights are so beautiful. You should see them up close." I ran back to the helicopter. Jack had the helicopter ready to go, rotors at full speed. I could see the tension in his shoulders as I climbed in. "We need to leave. Now. The team is gone. I don't know where, but we need more help. Bigger search party. This doesn't make sense." As we lifted off, I looked down at the station. The aurora was brighter now, visible even in the dim afternoon light. The ribbons of green and blue seemed to pulse, and for just a moment I could swear I saw shapes in them. Human-like silhouettes moving through the light. "You see that?" Jack pointed at his instrument panel. Every dial was spinning. Compass, altitude indicator, even the fuel gauge was jumping around like crazy. "We need to get out of this electromagnetic field or whatever the hell it is." We made it about 5 miles before the engine sputtered. "No, no, no," Jack muttered, flipping switches. "Come on, baby, don't do this." But the helicopter had other ideas. The engine died completely, and we started to drop. Jack worked the controls like a madman, using our remaining momentum to aim for a flat section of snow. We hit hard, not quite a crash, but rough enough that my teeth clacked together and my head bounced off the window. "Everyone okay?" Jack gasped. I checked myself. Bruised, but nothing broken. "Yeah, you?" "Been through worse." He tried the starter. Click, click, nothing. "Battery's completely dead." "That's impossible. We just had a full charge." I pulled out my flashlight. Dead. GPS unit. Dead. Even my watch had stopped. What the hell is going on? Jack's voice was rising, panic creeping in. I forced myself to think like a scientist. Electromagnetic pulse. Something drained all our electrical systems at once, but that would require... I stopped. I didn't have an explanation that made sense. "Look," Jack whispered. The aurora was spreading across the sky, but wrong. Instead of staying high up where it belonged, it was descending. The ribbons of light reached down like curtains, touching the ground in the distance. They pulsed and swayed, and I realized they were moving toward us. "We need shelter. Now." I grabbed my pack and kicked open the door. The research station was too far, but I remembered seeing an old weather hut on the charts, maybe half a mile east. We started running, or trying to. Running in deep snow with heavy gear is more like fast swimming. Behind us, the aurora lights were getting closer. I could hear them now, a sound like wind chimes mixed with radio static. The old hut was barely standing, 4 walls and a roof, built back in the 50s. But it had a door and walls, and that was more than we had in the open. We tumbled inside, and I slammed the door shut. Jack was breathing hard. "This is crazy. Lights don't chase people. Lights don't..." "I know." I looked around the hut. It was empty except for some old equipment, a metal table, and a wood stove. And there, scratched into the wall in what looked like charcoal, were symbols. Old symbols. The same ones I'd seen the Inupiat elders drawing when they talked about protecting against spirits. "Someone was hiding here before," I said quietly. The hut's single window was glowing green. I peeked out and immediately wished I hadn't. The aurora had reached the ground. The ribbons of light stood upright like pillars, swaying gently. And inside them, I could see shapes. Human shapes. Walking slowly, arms outstretched, faces tilted up with expressions of absolute joy. "Sarah," I breathed. I recognized her parka. She was walking through the light, and the light was walking through her. I could see it flowing in and out of her body, pulsing with her heartbeat. Her eyes were open but unseeing, her mouth curved in a smile. Behind her came the others. All 5 members of the research team walking in a slow procession through the aurora lights. "Are they alive?" Jack whispered. I didn't know. They looked alive, but moved like sleepwalkers, like puppets. One of them, Marcus, the team's electronics specialist, turned his head toward our hut. His eyes met mine through the window. They glowed with the same green light as the aurora. Then he spoke, but his mouth didn't move. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, like the whole world was speaking. "Join us, Storm. The lights are hungry, but they're also kind. They show you such beautiful things. All your questions answered, all your fears gone. Just let them in." "Don't listen," Jack said, pulling me away from the window. "Don't look at them." But it was hard not to. The aurora was beautiful. Even through the dirty window, even knowing something was horribly wrong, I felt drawn to it. My mind kept offering explanations. Mass hallucination from gas leak, rare electromagnetic phenomenon causing shared psychosis, elaborate hoax using holograms. The door started to rattle. Not from wind, not from the aurora-touched researchers outside. It was vibrating, the metal handle glowing faintly green. The light was trying to get in. Jack grabbed the old metal table and shoved it against the door. "Help me." We braced it with everything we could find. The wood stove, old equipment crates, our own body weight. The rattling grew more insistent. Light was seeping through the gaps around the door frame, reaching inside like fingers. Where it touched the floor, the wood began to smoke. "The symbols," I pointed at the wall. "Copy them, draw them everywhere." We grabbed charcoal from the stove and started drawing. I had no idea if it would work. I was a scientist, for God's sake, not a shaman. But the person who'd hidden here before had drawn these symbols, and they'd survived long enough to get away. Maybe. The moment we finished the first complete symbol, the rattling stopped. The light retreated slightly from the door. "Keep drawing," Jack said. We covered every surface, walls, floor, ceiling, even our own jackets. The symbols looked like combinations of circles and lines, stylized representations of the aurora itself, protection signs, warnings. Outside, the aurora lights were still there, but they'd stopped pressing against the hut. The research team stood in a circle around us, still smiling, still glowing, waiting. My radio, dead since the helicopter crash, suddenly crackled to life. That same musical static, but underneath it, a voice. Not Sarah's this time. Older, speaking Inupiaq. I only caught a few words. My knowledge of the language was basic, but I understood the tone. Warning, danger, run. Then in English, heavily accented, "Storm McCloud, you are in the hunting ground of the Arsarnarit. They feed when the lights come down. Your team is already consumed. The light eats consciousness, leaves the body walking. You have maybe one day before the feeding is complete and they hunt again." "Who is this?" I demanded. "Peter Ahanangnatoguk. I am 1 hour south. I am coming. Do not look at the lights. Do not listen to their voices. Do not let them touch you." The radio died again. Jack and I looked at each other. One day. And we were trapped in a hut surrounded by aurora lights and the hollow shells of people we'd known. Through the window, I watched Sarah's body sway in the light. Her smile never wavered, and behind her eyes, I saw absolutely nothing human at all. We lasted until nightfall. The aurora stayed around the hut like a siege, the lights pulsing and weaving. The research team, or what was left of them, stood in their circle, never moving, never speaking, except when the aurora pulsed brighter and that collective voice came through. So warm inside the light, so peaceful. "Why are you afraid?" Jack found an old survival manual in the hut. He read it cover to cover 3 times, I think, just to have something normal to focus on. I tried to make sense of what was happening. My scientific training was screaming at me. This violated every law of physics I knew. Aurora was plasma, ionized gas particles. It couldn't be solid. It couldn't think. It couldn't hunt. But it was doing all 3. Around 8 p.m., we heard the sound of a snow machine in the distance. The aurora lights immediately shifted, ribbons peeling away from the hut and flowing toward the new sound. "Someone's coming," Jack said. "We need to warn them." But we had no radio, no flares, no way to signal. We could only watch through the window as headlights appeared in the darkness, and a figure on a snow machine raced across the tundra toward us. The aurora was faster. Ribbons of light intercepted the snow machine like pythons striking. The engine died instantly, same electromagnetic pulse that had killed our helicopter. The driver jumped off and ran, but the lights were already wrapping around him. "No!" I yanked open the door, forgetting my own safety. "Storm, don't!" Jack grabbed my arm, but the man outside was rolling in the snow, trying to shake off the aurora ribbons that clung to him like cobwebs. He was screaming, not in pain, but in terror. Pure animal fear. I grabbed a piece of metal from the old equipment, some kind of antenna, and ran out. The cold hit me like a wall, but I didn't feel it. I swung the metal rod through the Aurora ribbon. It cut through the light. The Aurora recoiled like I'd hit something solid. The ribbon pulled back and the man scrambled to his feet. He was in his 60s, Inupiat, with traditional tattoos on his weathered face. Peter Anangnatoguk. "Inside," he shouted. "Now." We ran for the hut. The Aurora was reforming, ribbons weaving back together. They moved faster this time, angrier. A tendril caught Peter's leg as he reached the door. He cried out, and I saw frost forming on his skin where the light touched. Jack pulled him inside and I slammed the door. We braced it again with furniture. Peter was gasping, clutching his leg. Where the Aurora had touched him, his skin was gray, and the veins showed black underneath. Shit, they're faster now, more hungry. "What are they?" I demanded. He looked at me with dark eyes that had seen too much. "My grandmother called them Arsarnarit, light spirits. Your scientists would call them, I don't know. Electromagnetic entities? They exist in the Aurora, feed on the electrical energy in living things. Mostly they hunt caribou, birds, small animals. But every few decades, when the lights come down strong, they hunt people." "That's impossible," I said automatically. Peter laughed bitterly. "You were outside. You felt them. Still impossible?" I had no answer. "They eat consciousness," Peter continued, wrapping his leg with cloth. "Drain the bioelectricity from your nervous system. Brain first, then spinal cord, then organs. Takes about a day for a full feeding. Your friends out there? They're already gone. Bodies are still walking, but the person inside is consumed, used up. The Arsarnarit wear them like clothes, use them to lure more prey." Jack was staring out the window. "One of them is coming closer." It was Marcus. His body walked right up to the window, that same empty smile, and pressed his face against the glass. "Storm," his voice said, but his lips didn't move. "We need to study this phenomenon. Think of the implications. Come outside. Bring your equipment. This is the discovery of the century." It sounded so rational, so much like the Marcus I'd known. "Don't listen," Peter said. "It's not him anymore. It's never him again." Marcus's body tilted its head. "The old ways are dying, Peter. Your grandmother's stories can't protect you. The world is electromagnetic fields and quantum particles. We are the next step in evolution. Join us. Become something more." "If you're the next step in evolution," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice, "why do you need to trick us? Why not just take us?" The Marcus thing smiled wider. Too wide. "Because consciousness given freely tastes so much better than consciousness taken by force. But we can take it either way." All 5 bodies moved in unison, walking toward the hut. "The symbols won't hold much longer," Peter said quietly. "They're getting stronger. The Aurora storm is building. I saw the weather reports before I came. Tonight is just the beginning. By tomorrow night, the Aurora will be visible as far south as Seattle. The Arsarnarit will feed until they're gorged." "What do we do?" Jack asked. Peter pulled something from his jacket, a small pouch made of seal skin. "Traditional protection. It might buy us time, or it might do nothing. My grandmother's generation knew the old ceremonies, but most of that knowledge is lost. I'm not a shaman. I'm just an old man who remembers stories." He opened the pouch and poured out a powder, crushed mineral maybe, mixed with something else. He drew a circle on the floor around the three of us, speaking in Inupiaq. The words were rhythmic, musical, a prayer or an incantation. Nothing happened. Then the aurora lights outside began to pull back, just slightly. The research team bodies stopped advancing. "It's working," Jack breathed. "For now," Peter said. "But Storm, you asked the right question. Why do they need to trick us? I think there's a limit to their power. They exist between states, not fully physical, not fully energy. They need us to lower our psychological barriers, to accept them. That's why the bodies of the consumed are so important. They're bridges, ways to reach into our world more fully." I thought about this, about electromagnetic theory, about consciousness, about the intersection of physics and whatever this was. If they're electromagnetic entities, then they must have some kind of field signature, a frequency. And if they have a frequency, they can be disrupted, Peter finished. Yes, that's what the old ceremonies did, created interference patterns. Your metal rod worked for the same reason. "The research station," I said. "It's full of electromagnetic equipment. If we could get back there, maybe we could generate a field strong enough to disperse them. Or strong enough to draw every Arsarnarit in the Arctic straight to us," Peter countered. "They're already coming," Jack said quietly. He was still watching out the window. "Look at the sky." The aurora had spread across the entire horizon, no longer isolated ribbons, but a vast curtain of light descending. I could see shapes in it now, hundreds of shapes, thousands, all moving toward us. "The big feeding," Peter whispered. "It's starting." The temperature in the hut was dropping fast. Our breath came out in clouds. The metal walls were frosting over, ice crystals forming in beautiful, intricate patterns. The aurora lights were drawing energy from everything around us, including heat. Jack's lips were turning blue. "We can't stay here. We'll freeze." He was right. We had maybe an hour before hypothermia set in. "The research station is a half-mile north," I said. "If we can make it there—" "We won't," Peter interrupted. "Not on foot. Not with them hunting." "Then what?" Peter looked at his leg, at the gray skin where the aurora had touched him. "I can't run, but I can draw them away. Give you time to reach the station." "No," I said immediately. "We're not leaving you. You're not leaving me. I'm staying. There's a difference." He smiled, and it was genuine. Sad, but genuine. "I came here to warn you, to help if I could. This is how I help. My grandmother would approve. Fighting the Arsarnarit is an honor." "Peter, no time to argue." He stood, wincing. "I'm going outside. I'll head east, make noise, draw their attention. You two go north, fast as you can. Don't look back, don't stop. And Storm?" He gripped my shoulder. "Trust the old knowledge. Your science and our traditions, they're describing the same truth from different angles. Put them together." Before I could respond, he opened the door and walked out into the aurora-lit night. The lights descended on him immediately. Peter ran east, and he was magnificent. Even with his injured leg, even knowing he was going to die, he ran like a warrior. The aurora ribbons chased him, coiling and striking. He dodged, rolled, kept moving, drawing them away from us. "Go!" Jack pushed me out the door. We ran north. The snow was deep, and the darkness was broken only by the green glow of aurora everywhere. I could hear Peter behind us, shouting in Inupiaq. Battle cries, death songs. I didn't know which. Then the shouting stopped. I forced myself not to look back. Peter had bought us time. We had to use it. The research station appeared ahead, lights still on, equipment still humming. We crashed through the door, and I immediately went to the main control panel. Sarah had been monitoring aurora activity. All her equipment was still running, still recording data. The readings were impossible. Electromagnetic activity at ground level, coherent wave patterns that looked almost like brain waves, energy readings that spiked whenever the aurora moved closer to the station. "They're alive," I whispered. "Actually alive, not metaphorically. These readings show organized electrical activity, complex patterns, neural net level complexity." "Can we fight them?" Jack asked. I scanned the equipment. We had 3 high-powered radio transmitters, a radar array, the aurora monitoring sensors, and, this was key, a backup generator that could be overloaded to produce a massive electromagnetic pulse. It would destroy all the equipment, but it might disrupt the aurora entities long enough for us to escape. Except we had no way to escape. The helicopter was dead. Peter's snow machine was dead. We were 60 miles from the nearest help. The lights outside were reforming, coming back. They'd finished with Peter, and now they wanted us. I made a decision. "Jack, help me redirect all the transmitters. We're going to create an electromagnetic cage around the station, a Faraday cage, but active instead of passive. It'll keep them out, at least for a while." "Then what?" "Then I'm going to communicate with them." Jack stared at me. "What?" "They're intelligent. They communicate through electromagnetic signals. I can use the equipment to send signals back, maybe negotiate, maybe find a weakness. I don't know, but I have to try." It took 20 minutes to reconfigure everything. The aurora pressed close to the station, but the electromagnetic field held them back. I could see the research team bodies standing outside, faces pressed against the windows. Sarah's body was there, still smiling. I sat down at the communications panel and began. First, I tried simple patterns, mathematical sequences, prime numbers, Fibonacci series. The aurora responded immediately. The lights pulsed in matching patterns. They understood. Then I tried something more complex. I recorded my own brain waves, easy enough with the medical sensors Sarah had been using, and played them back through the transmitters. The aurora went wild. The lights surged against the electromagnetic barrier, pressing so hard I could feel the station walls groaning. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in 10 seconds. Frost exploded across every surface. "Storm, what did you do?" Jack shouted. I think I just showed them what consciousness tastes like, a sample, and they want more." But in their response, I learned something crucial. When they pressed against the barrier, their own electromagnetic signatures became clearer. I could map them now, see the frequency bands they existed in, find the gaps. "Jack, when I tell you, I need you to kill the barrier and overload the generator. It'll create an electromagnetic pulse that might disperse them." "Might?" "It's all I've got." I studied the patterns more. The aurora entities existed in a specific range of frequencies. They had to, or they couldn't maintain coherence. If I could generate interference at just the right frequencies. But there was a problem. The generator pulse would be omnidirectional. It would hit everything in a half-mile radius, including us. We'd be fried along with the aurora. Unless... "The Faraday cage," I said. "We can stay inside it, let it become passive instead of active. It'll protect us from our own pulse." "Will it work?" "In theory." "I hate that phrase," Jack muttered. Outside, the aurora was building to something massive. The entire sky was a seething mass of light. I could see shapes in it now, not human shapes. The Arsarnarit's true forms. They looked like networks of lightning, vast and complex, beautiful and terrible. Consciousness made of pure energy, hungry and eternal. The research team bodies had stopped smiling. Now they were just staring, blank-faced, eyes glowing. The Arsarnarit didn't need the pretense anymore. One more thing to try. I reconfigured the transmitters one last time and sent a message. Not in mathematics or brainwaves, but in something simpler. Electromagnetic pulses arranged in patterns that meant, why? The response came immediately, not through the equipment, but through every speaker, every radio, every piece of metal in the station. The Arsarnarit were speaking directly, using the world itself as their voice. Why do you eat? Why do you breathe? We are hunger-given form. We have existed since before your species learned to fear the dark. We will exist long after you are gone. You are food, delicious, conscious, electric food, nothing more. There's no negotiating, I said quietly. No reasoning. They're predators. We're prey. That's all there is. Then we fight, Jack said. I began the overload sequence. The generator started whining, building charge. We had maybe 3 minutes before it blew. Jack and I dismantled the active barrier and rebuilt it into a passive cage around just the control room, metal mesh on all sides, grounded properly. It would either protect us or cook us. 50-50 odds. Outside, the Arsarnarit sensed what we were doing. The lights pressed closer. The research team bodies began pounding on the windows, not with the random movements of the living, but with the mechanical rhythm of machines. Pound, pound, pound. 1 minute left. Sarah's body broke through the window. Glass sprayed everywhere. She climbed inside, moving wrong, joints bending at angles they shouldn't. Behind her came Marcus, then the others. "Get in the cage," I shouted at Jack. We scrambled into the metal mesh enclosure and sealed it. The generator was screaming now, the whine so high-pitched it hurt. The aurora flooded through the broken window, filling the station with green light. The research team bodies surrounded our cage, their hands pressed against the metal mesh, and where they touched, the metal glowed red-hot. 30 seconds. The aurora lights were inside the mesh now, seeping through gaps I hadn't seen, reaching for us. I could feel them on my skin, that same tingling static sensation, but painful now. Burning. 20 seconds. "Storm," Jack said, quietly. "If this doesn't work, it'll work." 10 seconds. The aurora found a gap in the mesh. A ribbon of light shot through and wrapped around my arm. I screamed. It felt like my arm was being torn apart from the inside, every nerve firing at once. I could feel the entity trying to push into my mind, clawing at my consciousness. 5 seconds. Jack grabbed the metal mesh with both hands and completed the circuit, grounding it perfectly. The aurora ribbon recoiled. 3, 2, 1. The generator exploded. I woke up to silence and smoke. The research station was dark except for a few emergency lights running on battery backup. Jack was next to me, unconscious but breathing. The metal mesh of our Faraday cage had turned black, scorched by the electromagnetic pulse. Outside the cage, the station was destroyed. Equipment melted, walls cracked. The bodies of the research team lay motionless on the floor, finally still. I crawled out and checked them. No pulse, no brain activity. Whatever the aurora entities had left behind was gone now, the last animating force dispersed by the electromagnetic pulse. Through the broken window, I could see the sky. The aurora was still there, but high up where it belonged. Distant, beautiful, safe again. For now. Jack groaned and sat up. Did it work? We're alive. That counts as working. We found a working radio in the wreckage, shielded equipment in a metal case. I sent out an emergency call. It took 4 hours for rescue to arrive, but they came. Helicopters, rangers, the whole cavalry. The official report said equipment malfunctioned during an unprecedented solar storm. 5 researchers dead from exposure. Peter Anang Natoguk died attempting a rescue. Jack and I survived by shielding in a Faraday cage when the generator exploded. All technically true, just not the whole truth. The university wanted to rebuild the station. I convinced them not to. That area is off limits now, marked as too dangerous for research. The Inupiat community agreed. They know the real reason. I spent the next year studying everything I could find about the Arsenarit, the old stories, the traditional knowledge, the science behind electromagnetic entities. Peter was right. Our traditions and their science describe the same truth from different angles. The aurora spirits are real. They're electromagnetic life forms that exist in the upper atmosphere, feeding on the bioelectrical energy of living things, usually animals, sometimes plants during intense auroral activity. Rarely when the lights come down strong enough, people. They're not evil. They're just hungry. But that doesn't make them any less dangerous. I work with the Inupiat communities now, combining modern monitoring equipment with traditional knowledge. We track aurora activity, watch for the warning signs of Arsenarit feeding behavior. When the lights start coming down, we evacuate. We warn people. Most folks think it's just superstition wrapped in science talk. That's fine. The ones who need to know. Jack transferred to a station in California. He never talks about what happened, but he calls me every March, just to check in, just to make sure I'm okay. I still study the northern lights, still marvel at their beauty. But I never forget what I learned that night in the Arctic. The aurora borealis is one of nature's most beautiful phenomena. Charged particles from the sun colliding with Earth's magnetic field, creating curtains of light that dance across the polar skies. But sometimes, very rarely, those lights dance to their own tune. Sometimes they hunt. And sometimes, if you're very unlucky, they notice you watching. I still work at the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, still protect the caribou and the wolves and the pristine wilderness. But now I protect something else too. The people who come here seeking adventure, seeking science, seeking beauty in the wild places. Because the wild places are more wild than anyone imagines. Last week, I got a report of unusual aurora activity near the coastal plain. Wrong season, wrong intensity, wrong behavior. I'm heading out there tomorrow to investigate, taking my modified equipment, the electromagnetic sensors, the frequency generators, the Faraday mesh, just in case. The Arsenarit haven't forgotten about me either. Sometimes on clear nights when the aurora is dancing, I hear whispers in the static of my radio, musical voices promising beautiful things, asking me to come outside, to look up, to let the lights in. I never do, but I listen, because knowing your predator is the first step to surviving it. And I intend to survive. The lights are beautiful. Never forget that. But some lights hunger for more than darkness. Some lights hunger for you. My name is David Strongeagle, but everyone calls me Raven. I've been a ranger in Tongass National Forest for 12 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything these ancient woods could throw at me. Bears, storms that could tear century-old trees from the ground, loggers who thought rules didn't apply to them. I was wrong about knowing everything. October in southeast Alaska means rain, not the gentle kind you can walk through, the kind that comes sideways, so thick you can barely see 10 feet ahead, the kind that turns the forest floor into a black mirror and makes the 200-foot Sitka spruces look like they're drowning in the sky. I grew up here, on Prince of Wales Island. My grandmother used to tell me stories about the Kushda Ka, tree spirits that protected the sacred places, she'd get this serious look on her face and say, "Raven, some things in the forest are older than our people, older than memory." I'd nod and pretend to believe, but inside I was thinking like the college kid I wanted to be. After I got my anthropology degree in Seattle, I came back home to help protect Tlingit cultural sites. But I treated those old stories like interesting folklore, not real warnings. That was my first mistake. The call came in on a Tuesday morning. My radio crackled to life while I was drinking coffee in my cabin, watching rain hammer against the windows. "Raven, we've got a situation." It was Tom Chen, my supervisor. His voice had an edge I'd never heard before. "Logging crew on the north side of the island. 12 men, all gone." I set down my coffee. "What do you mean, gone?" "Vanished. Equipment still running. No one there. Can you get out there?" The weather was bad, but I'd flown in worse. An hour later, I was in a helicopter with our pilot, Sarah, fighting through wind that threw us around like a toy. Below us, the forest was an endless carpet of green and black, broken only by the brown scar of the logging site. "Jesus," Sarah muttered. "Look at that." The clear-cut area was huge, maybe 20 acres of stumps and mud where ancient trees had stood yesterday. But she was right. Something was wrong with it. The stumps weren't scattered like normal. They were arranged in patterns, circles within circles, like something had been planning where each tree should fall. "That's not how logging works," I said. We landed in a clearing near the worksite. The rain had lessened to a drizzle, but the air felt heavy and thick. Wrong. I've been in these woods thousands of times, and they always have sounds. Birds, insects, wind in the branches. This forest was completely silent. The logging equipment was still running. A massive chainsaw lay on the ground, engine purring, blade spinning in the mud. A bulldozer idled nearby, driver's door hanging open. Coffee cups sat on stumps, still warm, sandwiches half-eaten. It looked like everyone had just stood up in the middle of lunch and walked away. But people don't do that. Not 12 trained professionals. Not all at once. I pulled out my radio. "Sarah, I'm going to look around. Keep the engine running." "Copy that. Raven, be careful. This doesn't feel right." She was right about that. I followed the footprints, 12 sets, all heading north from the worksite toward the tree line where the old growth began. The tracks were clear in the mud, work boots, all different sizes. I counted them twice to be sure. 12 men walking in a loose group. Then, about 50 yards from the equipment, the footprints just stopped. Not faded, not scattered, just ended. Like 12 people had been walking and then suddenly lifted into the air. I knelt down, studying the last print. It was a full footstep, heel and toe both visible, mid-stride. The next step should have been 2 feet ahead. There was nothing but undisturbed mud. That's when I noticed the trees. The stumps near me were fresh cut, oozing sap, but the ones in the pattern circles, the ones cut in those weird geometric arrangements, had something growing on them. Green shoots, fresh growth, impossible growth, because you can't cut down a 300-year-old cedar and have it start growing back in a day. I reached out to touch one of the shoots. I wouldn't do that. I spun around. An old woman stood at the edge of the clearing, wrapped in a traditional Tlingit blanket. Mary Kadashan, my grandmother's friend, one of the last people who still knew all the old songs and stories. "Mary, what are you doing out here?" "Same as you, came to see what woke up." She walked forward, moving carefully around the stumps. "You should have listened to your grandmother, Raven. She tried to teach you. These trees aren't just trees. Not here, not in the sacred places. Mary, 12 men are missing. I don't have time for... For what? For the truth? She pointed at the stumps with the green shoots. This was a burial ground, 800 years old. Your logging company cut down the guardians. Now the forest is taking payment. I wanted to argue. I wanted to explain about underground gas pockets causing hallucinations, about organized crime, about anything that made sense. But I kept staring at those footprints that led nowhere, at the green growth on fresh-cut stumps, at the absolute silence pressing down on us like a held breath. Where are the men, Mary? She turned and pointed deeper into the forest, toward the darkest part where the old trees stood so thick that daylight never reached the ground. They're still here, she said. They'll always be here now. The forest is keeping them. I should have left right then. Should have called for backup, for search and rescue, for anyone. Instead, I followed Mary into the old growth forest, because something in her voice told me she knew exactly what had happened to those men. The temperature dropped the moment we crossed into the ancient trees. Not gradually, instantly, like walking into a freezer. My breath came out in white clouds. In October. In Alaska, that's strange, but not impossible. But the cold had a weight to it, like something was pressing against my skin. Stay close, Mary said, and don't touch the trees. The forest here was different from the logged area. These were the giants, Sitka spruces and western red cedars that had been growing since before Columbus crossed the ocean. Their trunks were so wide 3 people couldn't have linked hands around them. The canopy overhead was so thick it felt like walking through a cave made of living wood, and it was still completely silent. Where are the birds? I asked. They know better than to be here. We walked for maybe 10 minutes, though it felt longer. The trees seemed to lean in as we passed, their branches reaching down. I kept telling myself it was just the wind, but there was no wind. The air was perfectly still. Then I saw the first logger. At first, I thought it was just a weirdly shaped tree trunk. The bark had an unusual pattern, lighter colored in a vaguely human shape. But as we got closer, I realized it was human-shaped. Arms, legs, a torso, a face. Oh, God, I whispered. His name was Rick Palmer. I recognized him from the logging company's crew manifest I'd reviewed on the helicopter ride. But Rick wasn't missing anymore. He was right there, fused into the trunk of a massive cedar tree. His body merged with the bark from the waist down, his legs becoming roots that dug into the forest floor. His arms were stretched out along the branches, fingers elongating into twigs. But the worst part, the part that made my stomach lurch, was that he was alive. His eyes moved. They tracked me as I approached, wide and desperate and fully aware. His mouth was open, trying to scream, but no sound came out. The bark had grown across his throat, sealing it shut, but his chest still moved. He was breathing. Somehow, impossibly, he was still breathing. Rick? I reached toward him. Mary grabbed my wrist. Don't touch. It spreads. What spreads? What the hell is this? The Kushta-Ka, the tree spirits. They're protecting the sacred ground the only way they know how, by making the intruders into guardians themselves. I pulled out my radio with shaking hands. Sarah, I need emergency medical and... Static. Just static. I tried again. Nothing but white noise with something underneath it. Something that almost sounded like wind through leaves, except we were inside the forest where my radio should work fine. They won't let you call out, Mary said. Not until they're finished. Finished with what? She pointed deeper into the forest. The others. We found them one by one. Jake Morrison was 20 feet up a spruce tree, his body merging with the trunk at chest height. His legs dangled below, still wearing work boots, but they were turning gray and bark-like. His hands had become part of the branches above him. He was crying. I could see tears running down his face, but like Rick, he couldn't make a sound. Carlos Mendez was further in, halfway transformed. His lower body was completely tree now, roots spreading wide. But from the waist up he was still human, still conscious. When he saw me, he tried to speak. His mouth moved, forming words. "Help me, please. It hurts." "How long?" I asked Mary. "How long does the transformation take?" "Days, maybe weeks." They stay aware the whole time, watching themselves become part of the forest, becoming the guardians that will protect this place forever. I counted as we walked. Rick, Jake, Carlos, Tommy Chen, both Martin brothers, old Frank Whitehorse, 3 guys from Seattle whose names I didn't know. That was 10, 2 more still missing. Then I heard it, a voice, thin and desperate, coming from deeper in the forest. "Raven, Raven, help me, I'm here." I knew that voice. Sam Begay, the crew foreman. We'd had beers together last month, talked about his kids. I started running toward the voice. Mary shouted behind me, "Stop, it's not him." But I kept running, crashing through undergrowth, following Sam's voice as it called my name over and over. The trees seemed to move around me, shifting their positions, making the forest into a maze. I ran for what felt like miles but might have been yards. I couldn't tell anymore. The ancient trunks all looked the same, and the darkness was so complete I might as well have been blind. "Raven, over here." I burst into a small clearing and stopped. Sam was there, or what was left of him. He was half transformed like Carlos had been, his lower body merged with a massive cedar at the clearing's center. But unlike the others, Sam's mouth still worked. He could still talk. "Thank God," he gasped. "You have to help me. You have to get me out of this thing." I approached carefully. Up close, I could see the bark growing up his ribs like a slow disease. His arms were starting to elongate, fingers splitting into branch-like appendages. "Sam, I don't know how to—" "Cut me out." His eyes were wild, desperate. "Use your knife. Cut me free before I become one of these things." I pulled out my knife, but something made me hesitate. Sam's voice was right, but his eyes were wrong. They weren't desperate. They were watching me, calculating. "Where's the last guy?" I asked. "Where's Bobby Terrence?" Sam's face went blank for just a second. Then he smiled, and it wasn't Sam's smile at all. "Bobby's right here." The clearing erupted with movement. Branches whipped out from every tree around me, moving with impossible speed and purpose. They wrapped around my arms, my legs, my chest. I felt bark pressing against my skin, rough and alive and hungry. The tree Sam was fused to spoke. Not with Sam's voice, but with something older, deeper, like wind through a canyon. "You trespass on sacred ground. You bring machines that bite and tear. Now you will guard what you sought to destroy." I struggled, but the branches held me tight. I could feel them starting to merge with my clothes, my skin. The same thing that happened to the loggers was happening to me. Then Mary was there, chanting in Tlingit. Old words, ceremony words. She pulled something from her blanket, a carved raven totem, dark with age. The branches recoiled from it like it was made of fire. "He is Raven Clan," Mary shouted at the trees. "He protects the sacred places. He is not your enemy." The branches loosened but didn't release me. The voice spoke again, this time from all around us, from every tree at once. "Then let him prove it." The branches dropped me. I fell hard on the forest floor, gasping. My arms and legs were covered in scratches where the bark had been forcing its way under my skin. Another few seconds, and I would have been like Sam, like all of them. Mary pulled me to my feet. We need to leave, now. But when I turned around, the forest had changed. The path we'd taken was gone. Instead, there were trees, ancient, massive trees that definitely hadn't been there a moment ago. The clearing was surrounded, boxed in by trunks so close together I couldn't squeeze between them. "They're not going to let us leave," I said. "Not until you prove yourself." Mary held up the raven totem. "This will protect us, but only for a little while. The Kushtaka are angry. Someone needs to answer for what was done here." I looked back at Sam, or the thing that looked like Sam. His face had gone blank, like a mask. Then I understood. Sam wasn't in there anymore. The tree spirit was using his body like a puppet, using his voice to lure me in. "Where's the real Sam?" The Sam thing pointed up. I looked. Sam Begay was 40 feet above us, merged completely with the upper branches of the cedar. His body was spread out like he'd been crucified against the tree, arms stretched along two massive limbs, legs dangling down. His face was still human, and his eyes were still aware, watching everything. Tears ran down his cheeks. "How many?" I asked the forest. "How many loggers are left?" The voice came from everywhere. "All of them are here. All of them will stay. All of them will serve." I did the math. 12 loggers taken. 10 I'd found in various stages of transformation. That left 2 still missing, Sam, who I'd just found, and Bobby Terrence. "Where's Bobby?" The trees around the clearing moved, not swaying, moving. Their trunks split apart, opening like doors, revealing a path leading deeper into the forest. An invitation, or a trap. "They want you to see something," Mary said quietly. "Something important." We followed the path. The trees closed behind us as we walked, sealing off any chance of going back. The air got colder with each step. My breath came out in thick white clouds now, and frost was forming on the bark around us. The path led to another clearing, bigger than the last. In the center stood the largest tree I'd ever seen, a Sitka spruce that must have been 1,000 years old, so massive that its lowest branches were higher than most trees' tops. Its trunk was scarred with old carvings, Tlingit symbols that I recognized from my anthropology training. This was a marker tree, a boundary, a warning that everything beyond this point was sacred ground. And it had been cut. Someone had taken a chainsaw to this ancient guardian. The cut went maybe a foot deep into the trunk, not enough to fell it, but enough to wound it badly. Sap bled from the gash like blood from an open wound. Bobby Terrence knelt at the base of the tree, chainsaw still in his hands. Or rather, his body knelt there. The man himself was gone. His skin had turned gray and rough like bark. His hair had become pine needles. His eyes were open, but showed only white. He'd been transformed faster than the others, more completely. He was barely human anymore. "He cut the marker tree," Mary said, her voice heavy with sorrow. "The oldest guardian in the forest. The forest took him first as punishment." The great tree's branches moved above us, creaking and groaning. The voice spoke again, but this time it was different. Sad, ancient, infinitely patient. "For 800 years we have stood. We have watched your people grow and live and die. We have sheltered you from storms, given you wood for your fires, taught you which plants heal and which plants harm. In return, your ancestors promised to protect the sacred places, to let the guardians stand, to respect the old boundaries." The branches gestured toward the logged area beyond the clearing. I could see it now, the full extent of the destruction. Acres and acres of ancient forest, cut down in a week of industrial logging. centuries of growth destroyed in days. Then these men came with their machines, the voice continued. They cut without asking permission. They destroyed without offering respect. They wounded the marker tree, the oldest of us all. What would you have us do? Allow this to continue? Watch as the sacred places are turned to stumps and mud? I didn't have an answer. What could I say? The loggers had violated sacred ground. The logging company had ignored the protected site markers. They'd broken laws, both the legal ones and the older, deeper ones that Mary's people had been following for centuries. But did that justify this? 12 men trapped in a slow, conscious transformation into trees, living out eternity as frozen guardians, aware but unable to move or speak or die. There has to be another way, I said. You've made your point. They'll stop the logging. I can make sure of it. Let the men go. The branches shook, and I felt anger in the movement, cold and ancient and absolute. Let them go, so they can tell others, so more machines can come. No, they will stay. They will serve. And you, the branches pointed at me. You will join them unless you can prove you are different, unless you can show us that humanity still remembers the old promises. Mary stepped forward, still holding the raven totem. He can perform the ceremony, the old one, the adoption ceremony. I stared at her. Mary, I don't know the adoption ceremony. I never finished my training. You know enough. Your grandmother taught you the songs when you were young. You just need to remember. The voice from the trees grew curious. An adoption ceremony? You would offer yourself to the forest. That's what it means, Mary explained to me quietly. The adoption ceremony bonds a person to the land spiritually. You become part of the forest, part of its protection, but not like them. She gestured to the transformed loggers. You keep your human form. You keep your freedom. But you also take on the responsibility. The forest becomes your family. Its pain becomes your pain. Its protection becomes your life's purpose. And if I do this, you'll let the loggers go? The trees were silent for a long moment. Then, some of them, those who are not too far gone, but the one who wounded the marker tree stays. And you will carry a piece of us inside you forever. You will feel when the sacred places are threatened. You will serve as our voice to your people. You will be bound to us until your death. It wasn't a great deal. It wasn't even a fair deal. But it was the only deal that might save some of those men. I'll do it. Mary nodded and began preparing the ceremony. She needed items, specific plants, stones from a sacred river, cedar bark from a tree that hadn't been cut. The forest itself provided them, branches bending down to offer what was needed, the ground opening up to reveal ancient stones. As she prepared, I looked up at the transformed loggers visible from this clearing. Sam, high in the cedar, still crying silent tears. Carlos, halfway transformed, mouthing wordless pleas. Rick, completely merged now, only his face still recognizably human, embedded in the bark like a grotesque carving. They were watching me, hoping I could save them, hoping this nightmare would end. I just hoped I was doing the right thing. The forest around us began to hum, a sound like wind through branches, but there was no wind. The trees themselves were singing, preparing for something that hadn't happened in generations. Mary handed me the raven totem. Hold this. Don't let go, no matter what happens. It's your connection to your clan, to your ancestors. It's what will keep you human when the forest tries to take you. Tries to take me? I thought this was supposed to save me. She gave me a sad smile. The adoption ceremony is a battle, Raven. a test. The forest will try to claim you completely, like it claimed them. You have to resist. You have to prove you're strong enough to walk between both worlds, human and spirit. If you fail, you'll become another tree. If you succeed, you'll be something new. Something the forest hasn't seen in a very long time. Great, no pressure. Mary began to chant in Tlingit, the old language, the sacred words. I recognized some of it from childhood, from nights sitting around my grandmother's fire while she told the old stories. I'd thought they were just stories then. The forest responded to Mary's chanting. The trees began to move, really move, their roots pulling up from the ground, their branches reaching toward me. The temperature dropped even further. Frost formed on my clothes, my skin. My breath came out in white clouds that hung in the air like ghosts. Then the branches touched me. Pain. That was the first thing. Not the surface pain of cuts and scratches, but deep pain, like the bark was forcing its way into my bones. I felt roots trying to grow through my feet, anchoring me to the ground. Branches wrapped around my arms, trying to stretch them out, trying to make me into the shape of a tree. I gripped the raven totem so hard my knuckles went white. Mary's chanting got louder, more urgent. The forest pushed harder. I could feel it now, not just the physical pressure, but something else. A presence, a consciousness. The Kushda-Ka, the tree spirits, pressing against my mind like a wave trying to drown me. Images flooded my thoughts. The forest, as it had been centuries ago, pristine and endless, before the first Europeans arrived. I felt the slow contentment of growth, the patient watching of seasons cycle from rain to snow to sun and back to rain. 800 years of standing, watching, protecting. Then the first cuts. Not many at first, small trees taken with respect, offerings left in return, old ceremonies performed. The forest felt those cuts but accepted them. That was the old agreement. Humans could take what they needed, as long as they gave respect in return. But then came more cutting, faster cutting. Machines that could take down in minutes what had taken centuries to grow. No offerings, no respect, no ceremonies, just destruction. The forest felt every cut like a wound. Every fallen tree was a child lost, a guardian removed. The pain built over decades, over centuries, turning into anger, into rage. And when the loggers came to this sacred place, when Bobby Tarrant started cutting into the marker tree, the oldest, most sacred guardian, the forest's patience finally broke. I understood now. This wasn't evil. This wasn't some monster hunting humans for sport. This was defense. This was protection. This was a parent protecting its children the only way it knew how. But understanding didn't make it right. I get it, I said through gritted teeth, fighting against the transformation. I understand why you're angry. But those men didn't know. They didn't understand what this place meant. They were just doing their jobs. The forest's response came like thunder. Ignorance is not innocence. No, I agreed. It's not. But neither is revenge. You want guardians? You want protectors? Then let me be that. Let me teach people. Let me make sure this never happens again. But do it through me. Through someone who can speak to both worlds. Not through torture. Not through this. The pressure increased. Bark was forming on my chest now, hard plates of it spreading across my ribs. My fingers were starting to split, elongating into branch-like shapes. I could feel my toes digging into the earth, trying to become roots. I looked at the raven totem in my hands. My grandmother's face flashed in my memory, telling me the old stories. The raven is a trickster raven, but he's also a transformer. He changes things. He moves between the human world and the spirit world, helping both. That's why we gave you his name. I understood what I had to do. I stopped fighting. The transformation accelerated immediately. Bark raced up my arms, my legs, my torso. I felt my body starting to merge with the ground, felt my consciousness beginning to stretch and thin, spreading out into the root system beneath my feet. But instead of resisting, I let it happen. I opened myself to it. I felt the forest's pain, its anger, its desperate need to protect what remained of the sacred places. And the forest felt me. It felt my 12 years of service protecting these woods. It felt every fire I'd helped put out, every injured animal I'd helped, every illegal logging operation I'd stopped. It felt my love for these mountains, these trees, this land that had raised me. It felt that I was already a guardian. The transformation stopped. The bark receded, pulling back from my skin. The branches unwrapped from my arms. My feet pulled free from the ground, though I could still feel the ghost of roots trying to anchor me. But something remained. A connection. I could feel the forest now. Really feel it. Every tree for miles around connected through their roots, sharing information, sharing awareness. I felt the old spruce to my left had a disease starting in its roots. I felt the cedar behind me was home to an owl's nest. I felt the marker tree's pain from its wound. And I felt the transformed loggers, their consciousness trapped in wood and bark, aware but imprisoned. "This is what you offer?" the voice asked. "Yourself as guardian? Your life in service to the sacred places?" "Yes, but on my terms. I stay human. I keep my freedom. And the loggers, the ones who can still be saved, they go free." Silence. Long silence. The whole forest seemed to hold its breath. "You are brave, Raven Clan, or foolish, perhaps both." The great marker tree's branches moved, considering. "Very well, we accept. But know this, you are bound now. You will feel every tree that falls in the sacred places. Every violation will be your pain. Every logging truck that crosses the boundary markers will call to you like a scream. Can you bear that burden?" I thought about it, really thought about it. A lifetime of feeling the forest's pain. A lifetime of being tied to this land, unable to leave, unable to ignore the call when the sacred places were threatened. It sounded terrible. It sounded necessary. "I can bear it." The forest sighed, and it sounded like wind through 10,000 trees. "Then let it be done." Mary completed the ceremony, marking my forehead with sacred symbols in cedar ash, speaking the words that my grandmother had once spoken, that her grandmother had spoken before her, going back generations to when the first Tlingit people arrived in these lands. I felt something shift inside me. Not painful, just different. Like a door opening in my mind that I hadn't known was there. The trees around the clearing began to release the loggers. Not all of them. Bobby Terrence stayed merged with the marker tree, the price for wounding it. He would be its guardian forever, trapped in bark, aware but unchanging. I could see in his white eyes that some small part of him understood this was his fate. But the others, the ones who hadn't been fully transformed yet, the forest let them go. Branches unwrapped. Bark receded. Carlos fell from his tree, gasping, his legs still half wood but alive. Jake climbed down, his hands bleeding where the twigs had been forcing their way through his fingers. Rick emerged from his cedar, stumbling, crying, still alive. Sam took longer. He was higher up, more deeply merged. But eventually, he too came free, falling 20 feet to land hard on the forest floor. I ran to him, helped him up. His body was covered in scars where the bark had been, like tattoos of wood grain etched into his skin. "Raven," he whispered. "What? What happened? You're safe now. You're going home." Not all of them made it. 3 had been transformed too completely, their consciousness too spread through the root system, their bodies too changed. They would stay as guardians, aware but unable to leave, protecting the sacred places for whatever remained of their lives, or their existence. I wasn't sure what to call it anymore. Mary led the survivors out, following a path the trees opened for them. The forest was gentler now, almost apologetic. It had made its point, it had taken its price, and it had gained something new. Me, bound to it, a guardian who could walk in both worlds. I stayed behind in the clearing with the great marker tree. "I'll need to explain this somehow," I said. "The Park Service will want answers. The logging company will want answers. I can't tell them the truth." "Then tell them a truth they can accept," the voice replied. "Tell them there was a cave-in, gas pockets, anything that fits their understanding of the world. Protect the sacred places by keeping their secrets. And the logging? You will stop it. That is your purpose now. You will stand between the machines and the guardians. You will be our voice when your people forget to listen." I looked at the marker tree's wound, still bleeding sap. "I'll do my best. That is all we ask." The official report said there had been a cave-in. Underground caverns common in the karst geology of southeast Alaska had collapsed under the logging equipment. The men had been trapped, suffered trauma-induced amnesia, and were lucky to be alive. The logging company bought it because the alternative was admitting they'd been working on a protected indigenous site without permits. They paid the survivors hush money and shut down operations on Prince of Wales Island permanently. The survivors didn't talk about what really happened. How could they? Who would believe them? But I saw them sometimes in town, and they'd look at me with a mixture of gratitude and fear. They knew. They knew what I'd traded to bring them home. Sam Bigay came to see me a month later. The scars on his arms where the bark had been were still visible, still looked like wood grain under his skin. He'd told his wife it was a weird rash from some plant in the forest. She didn't believe him, but she didn't push. "I remember everything," he said quietly. We were sitting in my cabin, drinking coffee, watching rain fall on the forest, being in the tree, feeling my body change, watching you make that deal. "I'm sorry you had to go through that. Don't be. You saved us." He looked down at his scarred hands. "But Raven, I can still feel it sometimes. The tree, like it's calling me back. Is that normal?" I didn't know what normal was anymore. "You're connected now. You'll always be connected. But you're not bound like I am. You can ignore the call. You can live your life. And you can't?" I shook my head. "This is my life now." He left after that, and I didn't see him again for a long time. The Park Service was happy with my work. I'd successfully stopped illegal logging on protected land, saved the logging crew, and somehow managed to avoid a public scandal. They promoted me to Cultural Preservation Specialist for all of Southeast Alaska. It was exactly the job I'd always wanted. It was also a life sentence. I could feel the sacred places now, all of them. Every old burial ground, every marker tree, every site where ceremonies had been performed for centuries. They called to me, especially when they were threatened. It was like having 100 alarm bells in my head, each one connected to a different location. When tourists got too close to restricted areas, I felt it. When development companies tried to buy protected land, I felt it. When someone cut down a tree without permission, I felt it like a knife in my gut. But I could also help. I worked with the Tlingit Nation to establish new protected areas. I trained other rangers in cultural sensitivity. I gave talks at schools about respecting sacred sites. I became exactly what the forest needed, a bridge between two worlds. Mary visited me often. She said I was doing good work, carrying on the old ways in a new time. She also said my grandmother would be proud. I hoped she was right. One night, 3 years after the incident, I went back to the clearing where the marker tree stood. I hadn't been back since that day, afraid of what I might find. The tree had healed. The wound Bobby Terrence had made was scarred over, but the tree was growing strong again. And Bobby was still there, his face visible in the bark, his eyes still aware. He looked at me when I approached. I couldn't tell if there was consciousness left in there, or if it was just the tree wearing his face like a mask. But I talked to him anyway. Told him about the logging ban, about the new protected areas, about the sacred sites being preserved. If he could hear me, if any part of Bobby Terrence was still in there, I wanted him to know his sacrifice had meant something. The tree's branches moved in a wind that wasn't there, and I felt approval through the connection we shared. Walking back through the forest that night, I felt the trees watching me, not threatening, more like family watching over one of their own. The Kushda Ka had accepted me. I was one of the guardians now. I thought about the old stories my grandmother used to tell, about the raven who could transform, who moved between worlds, who helped both humans and spirits. She'd named me well, because that's what I was now. Not quite human, not quite spirit. Something in between, something new, a transformer, a trickster, a guardian. The rain started again as I walked, washing over the ancient trees, feeding their roots, continuing the cycle that had gone on for thousands of years and would go on for thousands more. And I would be here to protect it, for the rest of my life, and maybe beyond. The old trees remember everything, including promises made and broken. Some contracts with the forest are written in languages deeper than law or blood. I'd signed that contract in bark and root and ceremony, and I'd keep my promise, even if it took forever. Behind me, deep in the sacred places, the trees sang their ancient songs, and I could hear every word.